The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Starfleet has catalogued thousands of spatial phenomena, from quantum singularities to subspace rifts, each following predictable patterns that can be measured, analyzed, and understood. But what happens when 7 energy signatures appear that defy every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation the Federation has ever developed? Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise-D, watching his viewscreen fracture reality itself. The stars didn't just distort, they bled. Colors that had no name in any Federation database poured through a wound in space-time, accompanied by energy readings that made his chief engineer physically recoil from her console. "Captain, I'm reading a subspace rupture at bearing 27 Mark IV. Lieutenant Commander Data reported. His golden eyes scanning readouts faster than any human could process. However, the energy signature does not correspond to any known phenomenon. It appears to be extra-dimensional in origin." "Shields up," Picard ordered, rising from his command chair. "Mr. Worf, can you identify the source?" The Klingon security chief's fingers danced across tactical controls, his ridged brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. "Negative, Captain. Sensors detect multiple life forms within the anomaly, but their biosignatures are unlike anything in our database." One reads as Kryptonian? "Impossible," Picard said quietly. "The Kryptonian species has been extinct for centuries." The rupture screamed a sound that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space but somehow propagated through subspace itself, making hull plates vibrate and crew members grip their stations. Through the cascading colors emerged 7 figures, tumbling through the void as the dimensional tier collapsed behind them with a thunderclap of released energy. "Transporter room, emergency beam directly to sickbay," Picard commanded. 7 individuals, unconscious, extreme spatial displacement trauma likely. "Aye, Captain," came Chief O'Brien's voice. "Locking on now." "Sir, I'm having trouble getting a clean lock. Their molecular structures are incredibly dense." "Compensating." "Got them." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of impulse engines and the soft chirp of active sensors. Picard exchanged glances with his first officer, Commander William Riker, whose expression mirrored his own mixture of concern and fascination. "Number 1, you're with me," Picard said. "Mr. Data, run a full analysis of that rupture's residual energy signature. I want to know where they came from and if more are coming." "Mr. Worf, security teams to sickbay. Maximum caution, we don't know if these individuals are refugees or threats." "Aye, sir," Worf rumbled, already coordinating his teams. As Picard and Riker entered the turbolift, the captain couldn't shake the feeling that the Enterprise had just become the stage for something unprecedented. In his years commanding the Federation's flagship, he'd encountered omnipotent beings, time travelers, and consciousnesses from beyond known space. But 7 individuals falling through a dimensional rupture? One with Kryptonian biosigns? The turbolift doors opened to reveal sickbay already bustling with organized chaos. Dr. Beverly Crusher moved between biobeds, her medical staff scanning the unconscious figures with tricorders that kept recalibrating themselves. Picard stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. They weren't just humanoid. They were heroes, warriors clad in colors and symbols that spoke of purpose and power. A man in blue and red, the stylized S on his chest catching the light. A woman in armor of crimson, gold, and blue, a tiara glinting on her brow and a golden lasso at her hip. A figure in black and gray, a bat symbol stark against his chest. Unconscious but somehow still radiating intensity. A young man in scarlet with lightning bolts. Another in green and black with a ring that pulsed with emerald light. A bare-chested man with scales and a trident, and a towering figure whose body seemed half flesh, half machine. "Beverly. Report," Picard said, approaching the nearest biobed. The man in blue. Crusher looked up, her expression a mixture of wonder and professional concern. "Jean-Luc. I don't even know where to begin. This one," she gestured to the man in blue, "has cellular structures that are absorbing photonic energy from our lighting systems. His muscle density is thousands of times greater than human baseline. The woman in armor shows divine genetic markers I've only read about in ancient Vulcan texts. And this one," she moved to the figure in black with pointed ears, "is a shapeshifter with 13 different organ systems that shouldn't be able to coexist in one body." "Are they dangerous?" Riker asked, his hand instinctively near his phaser. "Extremely," Worf said from the doorway, his security team flanking him, rifles ready. "Captain, I recommend we erect a level 10 force field around sickbay until we understand what we're dealing with." Before Picard could respond, the man in blue stirred. His eyes opened bright, impossibly blue, and locked onto the captain with such clarity and strength that Picard felt the weight of absolute conviction pressing against him. "Where?" The man's voice was deep, resonant. Where are we? Where's Darkseid? Easy. Crusher said, moving to his side. You're safe. You're aboard the USS Enterprise, a Federation starship. I'm Dr. Crusher. You've experienced severe dimensional displacement trauma. The man sat up too fast, too smoothly, and scanned the room with senses that clearly perceived far more than visible light. His gaze lingered on each of his companions, then returned to Picard. I'm Superman, he said simply. These are my teammates, the Justice League. We were fighting an invasion when something went wrong with the boom tube technology. We need to get back. Earth needs us. I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the United Federation of Planets, Picard replied, maintaining diplomatic calm despite the impossible figure before him. I'm afraid I must inform you that you're no longer in your universe of origin. The dimensional rupture has closed, and our preliminary scans suggest you've crossed into an entirely different reality, one where Earth is part of an interstellar alliance spanning multiple sectors of the Alpha Quadrant. Superman's expression didn't change, but Picard saw the micro-movements, the way his jaw tightened, the infinitesimal shift in his posture. This was a being processing catastrophic information while maintaining absolute control. Then we need to find a way back, Superman said. Our Earth is under attack. We will do everything in our power to help you, Picard assured him. But first, we must understand what brought you here and ensure you and your companions receive proper medical attention. The Federation's resources are at your disposal. Behind Superman, the others began to stir. The woman in armor's eyes opened ancient, knowing, and found Picard with Warrior's assessment. The man in black sat up silently, already cataloging exits and threats despite just regaining consciousness. The speedster vibrated slightly, his metabolism adapting to dimensional displacement. The man with the ring's light pulsed brighter. The Atlantean's gills flared as he processed the filtered atmosphere. The shapeshifter's red eyes opened, and Picard felt a gentle telepathic touch, cautious, respectful, questioning. 7 heroes. 7 gods. By some definitions. 7 individuals who could reshape the balance of power in the Alpha Quadrant. And Jean-Luc Picard realized that the Federation's greatest test wasn't going to be technological or military, it was going to be philosophical. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The Justice League had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The conference room of the USS Enterprise-D had hosted first contact scenarios with dozens of species: Vulcans, Klingons, Romulans, beings of pure energy, even representatives of the Q continuum. But never had Captain Picard felt quite so distinctly mortal as he did sitting across from 7 individuals who redefined the word power. Superman sat at the far end of the table, his posture relaxed but his eyes, those impossibly blue eyes, constantly scanning, assessing. Next to him, Wonder Woman carried herself with the bearing of royalty and the readiness of a warrior. Batman had refused to remove his cowl despite Dr. Crusher's protests, his white lenses reflecting nothing while revealing everything through sheer intensity of presence. The Flash drummed fingers on the table at superhuman speed until Wonder Woman's gentle touch on his shoulder calmed him. Green Lantern's ring cast a faint emerald glow across the polished surface. Aquaman studied the star charts on the view screen with the expression of a king far from his kingdom. And Martian Manhunter John Johns sat with perfect stillness, his red eyes carrying the weight of watching his entire species die. Data, Counselor Troy, Dr. Crusher, Commander Riker, Worf, and Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge completed the circle. The tension wasn't hostile, merely the friction of 2 completely different philosophies occupying the same space. To summarize, Data began, his positronic brain processing the impossible with characteristic precision. You originate from a parallel Earth where metahumans, individuals with abilities far exceeding baseline human parameters, formed an organization dedicated to protecting your planet from extraterrestrial, supernatural, and terrestrial threats. You were engaged in combat with an entity called Darkseid when his boom tube technology, a form of instantaneous transdimensional transport, intersected with a subspace anomaly in our universe, creating the rupture that brought you here. That's the technical version, Batman said, his voice a controlled rasp. The practical version is that we're stranded in a universe where our powers don't work at full capacity, we have no way home, and our Earth is currently being invaded by a new god who wants to erase free will from existence. Picard noticed how each member of the League reacted differently to Batman's assessment. Superman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Wonder Woman's hand moved to where her lasso hung at her hip. The Flash stopped moving entirely. Green Lantern's ring flared. Aquaman's grip on his trident increased. John's shape flickered momentarily, betraying emotional control. These weren't just powerful beings. They were a family separated from everything they knew. I understand your concern, Picard said carefully. However, I must be frank with you. The Federation has encountered dimensional rifts before, and closing them or reversing trans-dimensional displacement is extraordinarily difficult. We will dedicate every resource to finding a solution, but I cannot in good conscience promise immediate results. How long? Superman asked quietly. Unknown, Data replied. Commander LaForge and I have analyzed the residual energy signature from the rupture. The dimensional barrier between our universes appears to have been catastrophically reinforced by the collapse. Attempting to breach it prematurely could result in subspace fragmentation across multiple sectors. Translation. We try to punch through. We might kill billions. Flash said, his voice cracking slightly. Great. Just great. There may be another way, Geordi interjected, adjusting his visor. The energy signatures I'm reading from each of you are unlike anything we've encountered, but they're stable. If we can understand the fundamental physics of your abilities, we might be able to create a controlled resonance field that could thin the dimensional barrier enough for a boom tube or something similar to function. How long would that take? Wonder Woman asked, her accent carrying hints of something ancient and Mediterranean. Geordi exchanged glances with Data. Months. Maybe longer. The silence that followed was heavier than a collapsing star. Then we wait, Superman said finally. But we can't just wait. Captain Picard, you said Earth is part of an interstellar alliance. That means there are worlds out there that might need help while we're stranded here. Picard felt Counselor Troi shift beside him, her empathic senses clearly detecting something in Superman's emotional state. He knew what was coming before Superman spoke again. We're heroes, Captain. It's what we do. While your people work on getting us home, we can help protect this Federation of yours. I appreciate the offer, Picard said, choosing his words with diplomatic precision. But the Federation's approach to crisis intervention differs significantly from what you may be accustomed to. We operate under a doctrine called the Prime Directive, the principle of non-interference with less advanced civilizations. We also emphasize diplomatic solutions over direct action whenever possible. Batman leaned forward slightly. Let me guess. You watch people die while your regulations tie your hands. Mr. Wayne, Picard began. It's just Batman, the Dark Knight interrupted. And I've read your database. Downloaded it the moment I woke up in your sickbay. Your universal translator has made understanding your technology remarkably easy. The Prime Directive. Starfleet regulations. Your precious chain of command. All designed to prevent exactly what we represent: individuals with power making unilateral decisions. That is an oversimplification, Worf growled, his Klingon honor bristling at the criticism. Is it? Batman challenged. How many distress calls have you ignored because a civilization hadn't developed warp drive yet? How many genocides have you observed from orbit because interfering would violate your principles? The Prime Directive exists to prevent cultural contamination, Picard said, his voice hardening. To protect developing species from interference that could derail their natural evolution. It's not about cowardice, it's about respecting the rights of all sentient beings to determine their own destiny. Tell that to the ones who die while you respect their rights, Batman countered. Enough, Superman said. And the single word carried such weight that even Batman fell silent. The Kryptonian looked at Picard with an expression that somehow combined understanding and immovable conviction. Captain, I respect what you're trying to build here. A universe where exploration and diplomacy come before conquest. Where diverse species work together instead of destroying each other. It's admirable. It's noble. He stood. And despite the reduced solar radiation in this universe, despite the dimensional displacement weakening his connection to yellow sun energy, Clark Kent still radiated presence. But I've seen too many people die because good men did nothing. I've held children in my arms as they took their last breaths because I arrived 30 seconds too late. I've watched cities burn because I chose diplomacy over action. And I'm not saying your way is wrong, Captain. I'm saying it's not the only way. Counselor Troi spoke for the first time. Her voice gentle but probing. Superman, I sense profound loss in you. Guilt. The weight of worlds on your shoulders. But I also sense something else: hope. You genuinely believe that power should be used to protect the innocent, regardless of rules or regulations. I believe, Superman said quietly, that with great power comes great responsibility. And that sometimes, the right thing to do isn't the easy thing or the legal thing. It's just right. Picard studied the Kryptonian, recognizing in him something he'd seen in few beings: absolute moral clarity combined with genuine compassion. Dangerous qualities when paired with godlike power, but also potentially transformative. I cannot officially sanction vigilante action within Federation space, Picard said carefully. However, I also cannot imprison you for crimes you haven't committed. You're refugees under Federation protection, which affords you certain rights. Including the right to act if we see innocent lives in danger? Wonder Woman asked. Her warrior instincts clearly aligned with Superman's. Including the right to defend yourselves and others when under immediate threat. Picard clarified. Though I would strongly encourage you to work with Starfleet rather than around it. Our resources, our knowledge of this universe, our diplomatic relationships, these things matter in ways that raw power cannot address. John spoke for the first time, his telepathic voice resonating in everyone's minds simultaneously. Captain Picard speaks wisdom. We are strangers here, powerful but ignorant. We know nothing of this universe's threats. Its politics. Its balance of power. To act without understanding would be reckless. John's right, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan said aloud. We need intel before we start punching first and asking questions later. No offense, Supes. None taken, Superman replied, but Picard could see the tension in his shoulders. This was a being accustomed to immediate action, suddenly forced into patience and uncertainty. Then we have an accord. Picard said, rising to offer his hand to Superman. The Enterprise's resources are at your disposal. We'll work to return you home. And in the meantime, you'll respect Federation jurisdiction while we navigate these unprecedented circumstances. Together, Superman took his hand, and Picard felt the carefully controlled strength in that grip, enough power to crush his bones to powder, wielded with surgical precision to convey only friendship and agreement. Deal, Superman said. Thank you, Captain. As the Justice League filed out of the conference room, escorted by security teams that were more honor guard than prison detail, Riker moved beside Picard. Sir, you realize we've just invited 7 of the most powerful beings in existence to operate in Federation space with minimal oversight. I'm aware. Number 1, Picard replied, watching Superman pause at a viewport to stare at the unfamiliar stars. I'm also aware that attempting to contain them would likely prove impossible and definitely counterproductive. Better to earn their trust and cooperation than force them into opposition. Still, Riker said quietly, 7 gods walking among mortals. What could possibly go wrong? Picard didn't answer. He was too busy wondering the same thing. The Enterprise's holodeck hummed with activity as Geordi LaForge stood beside Data, both watching the Justice League run through combat simulations with expressions mixing professional fascination and genuine alarm. Computer, increase Borg drone count to 50, Batman commanded from within the simulation. Geordi winced. That's ambitious. What followed was a masterclass in coordinated devastation. Superman moved through the holographic Borg drones like a force of nature. Each precisely calculated strike disabling assimilation tubules and severing cortical implants without killing the Kryptonian had insisted on non-lethal parameters despite Worf's protests that Borg drones were already dead. Wonder Woman's sword sang through the air. Her Amazonian combat training adapting instantly to Borg movement patterns. The flash vibrated through shields and disrupted drone formations faster than the holodeck could render. Green Lanterns constructs massive hammers, cages, barriers contained and neutralized threats with creativity that made Geordi's engineering mind ache with possibility. Aquaman's trident channeled energy that shorted out cybernetic systems. Batman deployed gadgets that shouldn't work in this universe but somehow did through sheer tactical genius. And John phased through attacks while telepathically coordinating the team with precision that made the Enterprise's own tactical network seem primitive. 50 Borg drones fell in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Computer. End simulation. Data said quietly. The holodeck dissolved, leaving 7 heroes barely winded while Geordi and Data processed what they'd witnessed. Your powers are remarkable. Data observed, but I note they are operating at reduced efficiency compared to your baseline capabilities. Superman, your speed and strength appear diminished by approximately 23%. Flash. Your velocity is barely breaking Mach 10. Barry Allen interrupted. Frustration evident. Back home, I could lap the planet in seconds. Here, I feel like I'm running through molasses. The speed-force connection is there, but it's muffled, like trying to hear someone through a thick wall. The dimensional variance, Geordi explained, pulling up holographic displays of energy readings. Your powers are tied to fundamental forces that operate differently in this universe. Superman, your cellular structure absorbs electromagnetic radiation, but the stellar classifications in Federation space aren't identical to your universe's yellow sun. The photonic wavelengths are subtly different. Clark Kent Superman had insisted they use his real name in private, nodded thoughtfully. I've noticed. The ship's lighting helps. But it's like eating food that's nutritious but doesn't quite satisfy. I'm functional, just not optimal. The speed force is an extra-dimensional energy field. Data continued. His golden eyes analyzing readings. In your universe, it permeates space-time. Here, Subspace physics interfere with that connection. You're essentially accessing the speed force through a weakened signal. Can we amplify it? Diana Prince Wonder Woman asked. Her armor had been adjusted slightly, incorporating a Federation comm badge that looked incongruous against the ancient Amazonian design. Possibly, Geordi said, warming to the technical challenge. But it would require understanding the fundamental metaphysics of each power source. Your lasso. For instance, our sensors register it as both technology and something else entirely. Divine energy signatures that shouldn't exist in a materialist universe. Diana smiled slightly. The gods are real, Commander LaForge. Perhaps your universe simply hasn't met them yet. Before Geordi could respond, the ship's red alert klaxons blared. Bridge to holodeck 2. Picard's voice came through the comm system. All senior staff report immediately. Mr. Kent, your presence is requested as well. Minutes later, the bridge thrummed with controlled urgency. The main view screen displayed a planet class M. Earth-like, with visible cities and agricultural patterns indicating an industrial age civilization. Report, Picard commanded as Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman entered the bridge. The rest of the League remained on standby. But these three represented the core command structure. Captain, we've received a distress call. Lieutenant Worf announced. His expression grave. The planet Ventara IV. Population approximately 800 million. Pre-warp civilization equivalent to mid-20th century Earth technology, they're under attack. The view screen shifted to show massive vessels in orbit angular. Aggressive. Clearly military. They were bombarding the planet's surface with directed energy weapons, and even from this distance, Superman's enhanced vision could see the destruction, cities burning, populations fleeing, the systematic eradication of a civilization. Who are they? Batman asked. His detective's mind already cataloging the attacker's ship designs and tactics. Orion Syndicate. Worf replied with barely contained disgust. Pirates, slavers, criminals. They've been a plague on the Alpha Quadrant for decades. They're raiding Ventara IV for its dilithium deposits and taking survivors as slaves. Superman's hands clenched into fists. We have to help them. We cannot, Picard said. And the pain in his voice was evident. Ventara IV is a pre-warp civilization. The Prime Directive explicitly forbids interference. Our very presence in orbit would contaminate their cultural development. They're being slaughtered. Superman said. His voice rising. You're going to sit here and watch 800 million people die or be enslaved because they haven't invented warp drive yet? The Prime Directive exists for crucial reasons. Picard began. I've read your Prime Directive. Batman interrupted. Pulling up the relevant Starfleet regulations on a console with frightening speed, he'd somehow gained access to secure databases. General Order 1. Non-interference with natural development of alien civilizations. Violations punishable by court-martial. But there's an exception clause. Except where necessary to prevent imminent extinction of an entire species or civilization. Picard's expression tightened. The interpretation of that clause is subject to intense debate. Some argue that slavery and occupation don't constitute extinction. The Ventarans will survive, even under Orion rule. That's not survival, Diana said. Her warrior princess bearing radiating controlled fury. That's slow death. I've seen civilizations crushed under tyranny. I've watched people lose hope, lose their culture, lose everything that makes them who they are. You call that natural development? Counselor Troy spoke up, her empathic abilities clearly detecting the emotional maelstrom building. Captain, I sense that this situation is causing significant distress among our guests. Their moral frameworks are fundamentally oriented toward immediate intervention. I understand that, Picard said, turning to face Superman directly. But the Federation learned painful lessons about interference centuries ago. Earth's own history is filled with civilizing missions and benevolent occupations that destroyed cultures. The Prime Directive exists because power even wielded with good intentions can cause irreparable harm. And inaction can cause worse harm, Superman countered. Captain, I respect your principles. I understand you're trying to protect developing civilizations from corruption and manipulation. But there's a difference between interfering with natural development and standing by while innocent people are murdered by outside aggressors. The Orion Syndicate isn't part of Ventara IV's natural development, they're an invasive force. An invasive force that Ventara IV cannot perceive as extraterrestrial, data interjected. Our sensor readings indicate the Orions are using holographic disguises and primitive projectile weapons to appear as a rival nation-state from Ventara IV's own surface. The Ventarans believe they're experiencing a conventional war, not an alien invasion. That's even worse, Batman said. They're not just attacking, they're manipulating. Psychological warfare on a planetary scale. Picard stood. his command presence filling the bridge. I am aware of the moral complexity of this situation, but I am also sworn to uphold Starfleet regulations. We cannot interfere with Ventara IV directly. Then we will. Superman said simply. The bridge fell silent. Mr. Kent, Picard said carefully, I must remind you that while you're guests aboard this vessel, any action you take reflects on the Federation. If you violate the Prime Directive, we're not Starfleet, Wonder Woman interrupted. We're not bound by your regulations. You've given us sanctuary, and we're grateful. But we didn't swear an oath to stand by while innocents suffer. You would jeopardize your relationship with the Federation? Riker asked. Risk being branded as criminals in this universe? Yes. All three heroes said simultaneously. Picard studied them for a long moment. Superman's jaw set with Kryptonian determination. Wonder Woman's hand resting on her lasso. Ready to bind truth itself if necessary. Batman's white lenses revealing nothing but his posture radiating absolute commitment. These weren't reckless vigilantes. They were individuals who had weighed the consequences and chosen conscience over convenience. If I cannot dissuade you, Picard said slowly, then I must at least ensure you understand the situation fully. Mr. Data, brief them on Orion Syndicate tactics and capabilities. Mr. Worf, provide them with communication frequencies and shield harmonics. Commander LaForge, prepare a shuttle, a small, unregistered craft that cannot be traced to the Enterprise. Superman's eyes widened slightly. Captain, you're helping us? I am providing refugees with information necessary for their survival, Picard said, his tone careful and deliberate. What you choose to do with that information is your decision. The Enterprise will maintain position in the Ventara system's outer asteroid field. We will monitor the situation and provide emergency extraction should it become necessary. A slow smile crossed Diana's face. You're a cunning diplomat, Captain Picard. I am a Starfleet officer bound by regulations I respect, Picard replied. But I am also a man who recognizes that sometimes the law and justice are not the same thing. I cannot help you. But I will not stop you. That man actually smiled, barely perceptible. But there. Understood. We'll keep collateral damage to a minimum and try not to be seen by the Venturans. Do not try, Picard said firmly. Succeed. If the Venturans discover extraterrestrial life exists before they're ready, the cultural contamination could be catastrophic. Stealth rescue operation, Superman nodded. We've done this before. Captain, thank you. Do not thank me, Picard said. And if questioned by Starfleet Command, I will deny any knowledge of your actions. We have an understanding? Crystal clear, Batman confirmed. As the three heroes left the bridge to gather their team, Riker moved beside Picard. Sir, you just helped them violate the Prime Directive. I provided information to individuals who were determined to act regardless, Picard corrected. There's a difference. Besides, number 1. If 7 superpowered beings are going to intervene in a planetary crisis, better they do so with proper intelligence than rush in blindly and cause even more damage. And if Starfleet finds out? Picard gazed at the burning planet on the view screen. Then I'll face the consequences. But I won't watch 800 million people die when I had the power to prevent it. Even indirectly. In the shuttle bay, the Justice League assembled. All 7. Armored and ready. All right. Superman said, his voice carrying the weight of command. This is a stealth operation. We hit the Orion ships hard and fast. Disable their weapons. Free any captives. And disappear before the Ventarans know we exist. No showing off, no unnecessary risks. We're ghosts. Understood, the team responded in unison. As the unmarked shuttle dropped from the Enterprise's bay and accelerated toward Ventara IV, Picard watched from the bridge. Computer, he said quietly, log this incident as unexplained spatial phenomenon interfered with planetary crisis. No mention of extra-dimensional refugees. And logged. Captain. The computer confirmed. Worf approached, respect evident in his bearing. Captain, that was strategically cunning. That was morally necessary. Mr. Worf. Picard replied. Sometimes. The greatest test of leadership is knowing when to follow your conscience instead of your orders. On the view screen, energy signatures flared as the Justice League engaged the Orion Syndicate. The Federation's perfect principles met messy reality. And 7 heroes proved that sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. The Orion Syndicate vessel Emerald chains trembled as something impossibly fast slammed into its port nacelle. Captain Vokrash, a green-skinned Orion with cybernetic implants and a reputation for brutality, gripped his command chair as alarms shrieked through the bridge. What was that? He roared. Unknown. Captain. His tactical officer stammered, staring at sensors that made no sense. Something just hit us at impossible velocity. Shields held, but barely. It's circling the ship now. Sensors can't lock on, it's moving too fast. Below decks, the Flash phased through the hull, vibrating his molecules to slip past solid matter as Cisco Ramon had taught him years ago. The Orion crew couldn't see him as he moved through their ship like lightning made conscious, planting Batman's modified proximity charges on critical systems. Power generators, weapons arrays, shield emitters, each device carefully calibrated to disable rather than destroy. Charges placed, Barry reported through the comm system. Geordi had provided subspace frequencies the Ventarans couldn't detect. Ready on your mark. Above the planet, Superman hovered in the vacuum of space, yellow sun radiation from Ventara's star feeding his cells even if the wavelength wasn't quite right. His X-ray vision penetrated the Orion ships, seeing through bulkheads and armor to the cargo holds below where Ventaran prisoners huddled in terror. I count 4 ships, he transmitted. 3 cruisers and 1 massive freighter. The freighters holding approximately 2,000 captives. The cruisers are running bombardment patterns on the northern continent. Can you disable them without being seen by the Ventarans? Diana asked. She stood on the unmarked shuttle with Aquaman and John, waiting for their window. Clark's enhanced vision swept across the planet's surface, tracking primitive telescopes and observation posts. Negative. If I move at full speed, I'll create sonic booms and atmospheric distortions they'll definitely notice. And the Orion's holographic disguises aren't fooling anyone from this altitude. The Ventarans just don't have the technology to see orbital space clearly yet. Then we create a distraction, Batman said from his position inside the lead Orion cruiser. He'd infiltrated during the Flash's run, riding piggyback at superhuman speed before separating to access their computer systems. His gauntlet interface glowed as he sliced through Orion security protocols with frightening efficiency. Their communication array is broadcasting false signals to the planet, making the Ventarans think the attacks are coming from a rival nation. If I shut it down suddenly, the ground forces will notice the timing disruption. Do it, Green Lantern commanded. Hal Jordan floated in space beside Superman, his ring's emerald glow carefully dimmed to avoid detection. Batman creates chaos. Flash triggers the charges. Superman and I hit the freighter while it's distracted. Diana. Arthur. John, you 3 board and extract the prisoners. Acknowledged. Came the responses. Batman's fingers danced across alien interfaces. Executing in 3, 2, 1. Now. The Orion communication array died. On Ventara IV's surface, military commanders suddenly lost contact with what they thought were their own forces. Confusion rippled through command centers. The Flash's charges detonated in perfectly synchronized sequence electromagnetic pulses that fried shield generators and weapon systems without breaching hulls or causing casualties. The 3 Orion cruisers went dark, dead in space. Superman and Green Lantern moved as one. Clark's fists struck the freighter's engines with precisely calculated force enough to disable, not destroy. Hal's ring generated a massive construct of emerald energy. A giant hand that gripped the vessel and held it steady, preventing it from tumbling toward the planet. Going in, Diana announced as the shuttle accelerated toward the now helpless freighter. Inside the Orion cargo hold, 2,000 Ventarans pressed against the walls, their primitive understanding of the universe shattering as the hull suddenly tore open, not from weapons fire, but from a golden lasso that cut through reinforced uranium like paper. Wonder Woman dropped through the opening, her armor gleaming even in the dim emergency lighting. The Ventarans screamed. To them, she was impossible, a woman in armor that seemed ancient yet advanced, wielding weapons that defied their understanding of physics. Peace, Diana said, and the lasso at her hip pulsed with golden light. The lasso of truth didn't just compel honesty, it radiated certainty, calm, the absolute conviction that this warrior meant them no harm. You are safe. We are here to return you home. Aquaman and John materialized beside her. Arthur's Atlantean physiology and regal bearing commanded attention even among terrified refugees. John's shape-shifting abilities had given him a form that approximated Ventaran appearance, close enough to seem familiar, different enough to register as clearly not one of their captors. Telepathic soothing, John transmitted to the team while simultaneously projecting waves of calm toward the prisoners. His Martian abilities touched their minds gently, not controlling but comforting, easing panic into manageable fear. This ship is secure, Aquaman reported, his Trident's energy signature disrupting Orion weapons systems throughout the freighter. But we've got a problem, some of these people are injured. Serious injuries. They need medical attention our shuttle can't provide. Enterprise. This is Superman. Clark transmitted. We need emergency medical support for 2,000 individuals. Can you? Absolutely not. Picard's voice came back. Firm but not unkind. We cannot reveal the Enterprise to a pre-warp civilization. However, there is a Federation medical outpost on Ventara 6, 3 light-years from your position. If you can transport the prisoners there in your shuttle. Not fast enough. Batman interrupted from the Orion cruiser he'd commandeered. Multiple injuries won't survive a 3-hour journey at maximum shuttle velocity. Superman's jaw set. Then I'll carry the shuttle. What? Geordi's voice crackled with disbelief. Superman, even with your strength, dragging a shuttle at warp-equivalent speeds through normal space would create subspace disruptions visible across 2 sectors. Then I'll do it fast enough that no one notices. Clark replied. Flash. Can you get to the shuttle? Already here, Barry confirmed. Having run across vacuum, something that shouldn't be possible but was when you could vibrate your molecules and create localized air pockets. Ready to vibrate the hull. Make us harder to detect on sensors. Green Lantern. Can your ring conceal us? Superman asked. Hal's ring flared. Stealth construct. Coming up. Won't fool high-level sensors, but might blur us enough to pass for a subspace anomaly. Do it, Diana commanded. All prisoners aboard the shuttle, now. What followed was controlled chaos. Wonder Woman used her lasso to create a glowing bridge of golden energy between freighter and shuttle. Aquaman and John guided the terrified Ventarans across, their calm leadership preventing panic. Batman remotely piloted the commandeered Orion cruiser to block the planet's view of the operation. The Flash vibrated the shuttle's hull at frequencies that made it shimmer in and out of normal space. And Green Lantern constructed a massive sphere of emerald energy around the entire operation. 2,000 people. 4 minutes. 0 Ventaran casualties. Everyone's aboard, Diana confirmed. But Superman, this shuttle's structural integrity won't handle. I've got it, Clark said, positioning himself at the shuttle's bow. His hands gripped the hull with careful strength, and he accelerated smoothly, pushing the vessel faster and faster. Behind him, the Flash's vibrations reduced atmospheric friction. Green Lantern's construct shielded them from detection. And Superman's Kryptonian physiology, even at reduced capacity, achieved velocities that made instruments blur. 3 light-years in 14 minutes. The Ventara VI medical outpost staff rushed into organized chaos as 2,000 injured refugees materialized, delivered by a shuttle that appeared, unloaded, and vanished before anyone could properly scan it. Back in orbit of Ventara IV. The Justice League regrouped. Status? Superman asked. Breathing hard but steady. All Orion vessels disabled, Batman reported. I've uploaded their logs to the Enterprise. Captain Picard. The Orion Syndicate has been raiding 17 pre-warp civilizations in this sector. Ventara IV was just the latest. Picard's voice carried quiet fury. We will forward this information to Starfleet Command. The Syndicate will answer for these crimes. What about the Ventarans? Diana asked. They saw me, they'll have questions. Let them question, John said, his telepathic voice resonating with ancient wisdom. Sometimes, the glimpse of something greater inspires civilizations to reach higher. We showed them strength tempered with mercy. Perhaps that vision will guide them toward peace. Or toward cargo cults and religious fanaticism. Worf grumbled from the Enterprise. Cultural contamination is not theoretical, it has consequences. So does genocide. Superman replied quietly. We made our choice. We'll live with the consequences. The unmarked shuttle docked with the Enterprise, and the Justice League filed onto the bridge. The crew's expressions were mixed: admiration, concern, worry, respect. Picard stood from his command chair. You succeeded. 2,000 lives saved, the Orion Syndicate's operation disrupted. And minimal cultural contamination. I must admit, I did not expect such surgical precision. We've done this before, Batman said. Power without control is just destruction. We've learned to be careful. You were seen, data observed. Preliminary reports from Ventara IV indicate multiple witnesses describing a warrior goddess and impossible flying machines. Their media networks are already speculating about divine intervention. Diana smiled slightly. Let them speculate. Throughout history, my people have appeared to mortals in times of crisis. Some called us gods. Others called us angels. The truth is simpler: we're just people trying to help. People who can punch through starship hulls and outrun sensor locks, Riker muttered, but his tone was admiring rather than critical. Picard studied the 7 heroes before him. They were exhausted. Even Superman showed signs of strain, the dimensional displacement and reduced solar radiation taking their toll. But they stood tall, unbowed. Satisfied not with glory but with having done what they believed was right. I will report this incident to Starfleet Command. Picard said carefully. I will describe an unauthorized intervention by dimensionally displaced refugees who acted against Federation advice to prevent mass casualties. I will recommend no punitive action, given the extenuating circumstances and positive outcome. Will Starfleet agree? Green Lantern asked. Some will, Picard acknowledged. Others will call for your immediate detention. The Federation is not monolithic, we debate, we disagree, we struggle with moral complexity just as you do. But I believe most officers will recognize that, while your methods violate our protocols, your intentions align with our values. Protecting the innocent, Superman said. Seeking justice. Respecting life. Precisely, Picard confirmed. Welcome to the complicated reality of interstellar politics, where principles meet practicality and good people must make impossible choices. Counselor Troy approached Wonder Woman, her empathic senses clearly detecting something. You're troubled. Not by what you did, but by what you saw. Diana nodded slowly. The Ventarans we rescued, they were terrified. Not just of their captors, but of us. They didn't see saviors. They saw incomprehensible beings wielding incomprehensible power. It made me remember when I first left Themyscira and entered man's world. People looked at me the same way, fear and awe mixed together. The burden of power, Troy said softly. When you're strong enough to change everything, people forget you can still feel pain, still doubt, still fear making the wrong choice. 1. Exactly, Diana whispered. Superman overheard and placed a hand on her shoulder. That fear keeps us honest. The day we stop questioning ourselves is the day we become tyrants. From the command chair, Picard watched the interaction and felt something shift in his understanding. These weren't reckless vigilantes or dangerous wildcards. They were philosophers as much as warriors, carrying the weight of their power with genuine humility. Mr. Data, Picard said quietly, cross-reference the Orion Syndicate's logs. If they've been raiding 17 pre-warp civilizations, there may be more prisoners out there. Data's fingers flew across his console. Confirmed, Captain. I am detecting patterns indicating 12 more potential holding facilities across 4 sectors. Superman's head turned sharply. More people enslaved? Likely thousands. Data confirmed. The Justice League exchanged glances. No words were necessary. The decision was already made. Captain, Superman said. We'd like to continue helping. If you'll have us. Operating within Federation space. Coordinating with Starfleet when possible. But retaining our ability to act when regulations prevent intervention. Picard considered this carefully. An unofficial relationship. The Federation provides intelligence and support. You provide flexible response capabilities. We prefer the term heroes, the Flash said with a slight grin, but yeah, basically. It's irregular, Picard admitted. It violates at least a dozen protocols. Starfleet Command will likely have apoplexy. But, Riker prompted, seeing where his captain was going. But the universe is vast and complex. And rigid adherence to protocol in the face of suffering is its own form of moral failure. Picard finished. Very well. The Enterprise will serve as your liaison with the Federation. We'll provide intelligence, coordinate extraction of refugees, and offer what support we can within the bounds of regulations. And when we operate outside those bounds? Batman asked. Then we maintain plausible deniability, Picard said with the faintest smile. The Federation has a long tradition of officers who interpret regulations creatively, in service of higher principles. Wonder Woman actually laughed a warm, genuine sound. Captain Picard, I believe we're going to get along splendidly. As the Justice League departed to their assigned quarters, exhausted but purposeful, Picard returned to his command chair. Sir, Worf said quietly, we just formed an alliance with 7 beings who could potentially destroy the Enterprise if they chose to. I'm aware, Mr. Worf, Picard replied, but I believe we've also gained allies who represent the best of what power can be: strength tempered by compassion, conviction balanced by doubt, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. On the view screen, Ventara IV rotated peacefully, its people safe, unaware of how close they'd come to extinction. And in the depths of space, 7 heroes found their first true purpose in a universe not their own. To be the conscience Starfleet couldn't always afford to be. The Prime Directive met its philosophical counterpoint, and the Federation would never be the same. The warbird Valdor's shadow cut through space on a vector that would intercept the Enterprise in 3 hours. On its bridge, Commander Tomalak of the Romulan Star Empire studied holographic intelligence reports with the calculating precision that had made him one of the Tal Shiar's most effective operatives. Enhance Sector 4 to 7. He commanded. The hologram shifted, revealing grainy surveillance footage captured by a cloaked probe near Ventara IV. 7 figures. Impossible abilities. And most intriguing power readings that defied conventional physics. Analysis, Tomalak demanded. His science officer, a severe woman named Velek, manipulated the data with practiced efficiency. The humanoid in blue demonstrates strength consistent with Class 7 industrial equipment and velocity approaching Warp 1 in atmospheric conditions. The female in armor wields weapons that generate electromagnetic signatures similar to ancient Vulcan psionic artifacts. The one in black possesses no superhuman abilities but displays tactical genius rivaling our own military strategists. The others show equally anomalous capabilities. Origin? Tomalak asked. Though he already suspected the answer. Unknown, Velek confirmed. They appeared simultaneously with a dimensional rupture 3 days ago. The Federation has not claimed them as weapons projects or allied species. Tal Shiar intelligence suggests they are refugees from an alternate reality. Tomalak's lips curved into something approximating a smile. Refugees? How? Convenient. The Federation gives them sanctuary. And we acquire 7 living weapons for the Romulan Star Empire. Sub-Commander Rennick. Prepare boarding parties. We'll take them alive if possible. But their technology and biology are the priority. Commander, Rennick said carefully, Federation reports indicate these individuals destroyed 4 Orion Syndicate vessels with minimal effort. Engaging them directly could prove costly. Which is why we won't engage them directly, Tomalak replied. We'll use subtlety. The Enterprise is en route to Starbase 157 for crew rotation. We'll wait until they're in the neutral zone. Then create a diplomatic incident that requires Picard's immediate attention. While he's distracted, we extract 1 or 2 of these refugees for study. By the time Starfleet responds, we'll be deep in Romulan space. And if the refugees resist? Tomalak gestured to the hologram showing Superman punching through a starship hull. Then we learn the limits of their power through field testing. The Praetor will reward us regardless, either we acquire unprecedented weapons, or we gain intelligence on how to neutralize them. The Federation's newest allies become our strategic advantage. The Warbird's cloaking device hummed to life, bending light and sensor waves around the vessel until it became invisible to conventional detection. Set course, Tomalak commanded. And inform the Praetor that Operation Prometheus has begun. Aboard the Enterprise, Clark Kent stood in 10 forward, staring through the vast windows at stars that weren't his own. The lounge was quiet at this hour gamma shift, with most crew sleeping. But Superman rarely needed much rest, and even reduced solar radiation couldn't completely eliminate his Kryptonian endurance. Couldn't sleep either? Gannon's voice came from behind the bar. Warm and knowing. Clark turned, offering a tired smile. I don't actually need to sleep much. But it helps with the mental exhaustion. This universe is different from what I expected. Guinan poured 2 glasses of Aldebaran whiskey synthahol for most crew, but she kept the real thing for special occasions. She slid one toward Clark. Different how? More complicated. Clark admitted, accepting the glass. Back home, the lines between right and wrong are usually pretty clear. Alien invasion? Stop it. Natural disaster? Save everyone you can. Supervillain threatening the city? Take them down. But here, stopping an alien invasion might violate the Prime Directive. Guinan finished. Saving everyone might contaminate a developing culture. Taking down a threat might destabilize interstellar politics. Exactly, Clark sighed. Sipping the whiskey. The alcohol didn't affect him. Kryptonian metabolism burned through it instantly, but the ritual of drinking brought comfort. Picard keeps talking about respecting civilization's right to self-determination. About how interference, even with good intentions, can cause more harm than good. And intellectually, I understand. The Federation's built something incredible here, hundreds of species cooperating, exploring, learning together. That doesn't happen by accident. It requires rules, protocols, mutual respect. But? Guinan prompted. But I remember holding a little girl in Metropolis while she died from injuries I could have prevented if I'd arrived 30 seconds earlier, Clark said quietly. I remember entire cities turned to ash because I chose negotiation over immediate action. I remember looking into the eyes of people I couldn't save and seeing their hope die. And now I'm in a universe where people are dying every day while Starfleet watches from orbit because regulations say getting involved would be wrong. Guinan studied him with eyes that seemed far older than her appearance suggested. You carry a lot of weight, Superman. The weight of every person you couldn't save, every choice that didn't work out perfectly. That's the burden of power, knowing you could do more, but having to decide whether you should. How do you deal with it? Clark asked. The Enterprise crew, I mean. They encounter suffering constantly. Pre-warp civilizations tearing themselves apart with war, famine, disease. And Picard just Watches. Records. Files, reports. How do they live with that? By understanding something you haven't quite accepted yet, Guinan said gently. That saving everyone isn't always the same as helping them. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give a civilization is the space to make their own mistakes and learn their own lessons. Even if those mistakes kill millions? Even then, Guinan confirmed. Because the alternative powerful beings imposing their will on weaker civilizations, no matter how benevolent, that's called imperialism. The Federation learned that lesson the hard way. Ask Picard about the Mintakans sometime. Or the Edo. Or any of the dozens of civilizations that nearly destroyed themselves because Starfleet officers thought they knew better. Clark was quiet for a long moment. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that my power is useless here? Your power isn't useless. Guinan corrected. It's just not the solution to every problem. The Justice League saved 2,000 people from the Orion Syndicate. That was good. That was right. But if you'd revealed yourselves to the Ventarans, if you'd tried to save their civilization from its own internal conflicts, you would have robbed them of something precious, the right to choose their own path. The right to suffer, Clark said bitterly. The right to grow, Guinan countered. Suffering isn't good, Superman, but it's real. It's part of how sapient beings develop, learn, build resilience. If you remove all suffering, all challenge, all consequence, you don't create paradise, you create a zoo. Before Clark could respond, the ship's red alert klaxons blared. Bridge to all hands, Picard's voice came through the comm system. Battle stations. Romulan warbird decloaking off the port bow. Clark's superhuman speed carried him to the bridge in seconds. The rest of the Justice League arrived moments later, Diana and Batman emerging from the holodeck where they'd been training, John materializing from his quarters, the Flash vibrating into existence, Green Lantern and Aquaman rushing from 10 forward. The view screen showed a Romulan warbird hanging in space, its predatory design unmistakable. But something was wrong. The vessel's weapons were powered down, and it was broadcasting on open channels. This is Commander Tomalak of the Romulan Star Empire, a voice announced. Captain Picard, we meet again under unfortunate circumstances. I am here on a diplomatic mission regarding the dimensional refugees you harbor. Picard's expression remained neutral, but Clark noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. Commander Tomalak, your presence in Federation space is unusual for a diplomatic mission. Perhaps you'd care to explain why you felt a warbird was necessary? Tomalak's face appeared on the view screen, sharp features, calculating eyes, the bearing of a predator assessing prey. The Romulan Senate has concerns about 7 individuals possessing unprecedented power operating without accountability in the Alpha Quadrant. We request a meeting to discuss mutual interests. By mutual interests, you mean acquisition? Batman said flatly, stepping forward. You want to study us? Take samples. Figure out how to replicate our abilities or develop countermeasures. Tomalak's expression didn't change. I see your intelligence gathering is efficient. Yes, the Romulan Star Empire has strategic concerns. 7 beings who can disable military vessels with minimal effort represent a significant security threat. We propose a simple exchange. You submit to non-invasive medical scans, share the scientific principles underlying your abilities, and in return, we provide you with intelligence regarding dimensional physics that might aid your return home. You're offering to help us? Wonder Woman asked skeptically. We're offering a mutually beneficial arrangement, Tomalak clarified. The Federation may trust you, but the Romulan Empire is less naive. We prefer certainty to hope. The answer is no, Superman said firmly. We're not weapons to be studied or threats to be neutralized. We're people trying to find our way home. Tomalak smiled coldly. I was hoping you'd say that. It makes the alternative much simpler. The Warbird's weapons suddenly powered up. But they didn't target the Enterprise, they targeted a small Federation colony transport that had just entered the system, carrying 200 civilians. As I said, unfortunate circumstances. Tomalak continued. That transport is experiencing a critical warp core failure. They have approximately 4 minutes before a breach occurs. The Enterprise could save them. But that would require lowering your shields and diverting power to your transporter systems. During which time, my Warbird's weapons would be locked on your bridge. Or, your dimensional refugees could save the transport. In which case, my cloaked support vessels, yes, there are 3 more, will be free to fire on them without worrying about Federation political consequences. You're threatening innocent civilians to force our cooperation, Diana said, her hand moving to her lasso. I'm presenting options, Tomalak replied. Save the transport and risk yourselves. Let the transport die and preserve your principles. Or submit to our scans and everyone's lives. You have 4 minutes to decide. Picard's jaw clenched. Mr. Worf, tactical analysis. 3 cloaked vessels confirmed. Worf growled. Disruptor banks charged. If we lower shields to transport the civilians, the warbirds could fire before our shields reinitialize. We would be defenseless. And if the Justice League engages? Riker asked. Data's fingers flew across his console. The cloaked vessels are positioned to create crossfire. Even with superhuman abilities, the probability of the League sustaining serious injury is 73%, and the transport's warp core will breach in 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Clark looked at Picard. The captain's face was a mask of controlled fury, a man watching his principles weaponized against him. Captain, Superman said quietly, permission to engage. You'll be walking into a trap. Picard warned. Wouldn't be the first time, the Flash muttered. We're heroes, Wonder Woman said simply. We don't let people die because it's tactically disadvantageous to save them. Picard held Superman's gaze for a long moment, and Clark saw the internal struggle the Starfleet captain torn between regulations and conscience, between strategic wisdom and moral imperative. Go, Picard said finally. But if you're captured, I cannot guarantee the Federation will mount a rescue operation. Diplomatic relations with the Romulan Empire are already strained. Understood, Batman said. We'll handle it. The 7 heroes disappeared in a transporter beam, not to the transport, but to the space between the Enterprise and the colony vessel, materializing in the vacuum where Tomalak's trap waited. A bold choice, Tomalak observed from his view screen. And a foolish one. Fire. The cloaked Romulan vessels revealed themselves as their disruptors opened fire. Emerald energy bolts converging on the Justice League from 3 different vectors. But the heroes were already moving. Superman flew directly into the transport, his Kryptonian physiology shielding him from disruptor fire that would vaporize normal matter. His hands found the failing warp core, and with precise applications of heat vision, he stabilized the reaction just long enough for the Flash to evacuate all 200 civilians at super speed. Green Lantern's ring generated a massive shield construct that absorbed the Romulans' opening salvo. Wonder Woman's bracelets deflected energy bolts with precision born of millennia of combat training. Aquaman's trident channeled exotic energies that disrupted Romulan targeting systems. Batman deployed countermeasures, modified photon charges that created false sensor readings. And John turned intangible, phasing through the Romulan vessels to disable their weapons from within. 4 minutes later, the civilians were safe aboard the Enterprise. The Romulan warbirds hung dead in space, weapons disabled but hulls intact, and the Justice League regrouped. Slightly singed but fundamentally victorious. Impossible, Tomalak whispered, staring at the tactical display. 7 individuals defeated 4 warbirds in 4 minutes. Commander Tomalak, Picard's voice carried quiet satisfaction. I believe the dimensional refugees have answered your question about their capabilities. I suggest you withdraw before they decide to be less merciful. Tomalak's face twisted with barely controlled fury. But he was a strategist above all, and he recognized when a battle was lost. This isn't over, Picard. The Romulan Empire will not forget this insult. It wasn't an insult, Superman said, floating near the view screen with arms crossed. It was a demonstration. We're not weapons. We're not threats. We're people trying to help. If the Romulan Empire wants to make us enemies, we'll oblige. But we'd prefer cooperation to conflict. Cooperation requires trust. Tomalak spat. Something you've done nothing to earn. And threatening civilians is your idea of building trust? Diana asked pointedly. Tomalak had no answer for that. With a gesture, his warbirds engaged their cloaking devices and vanished into the darkness between stars. The bridge crew exhaled collectively. Picard turned to face the Justice League as they materialized back aboard. That, the captain said carefully, was extraordinarily reckless. It worked. The Flash pointed out. This time, Picard countered. But you've now made an enemy of one of the Federation's most dangerous adversaries. The Romulan Empire doesn't forget perceived slights, and Commander Tomalak is particularly vindictive. He threatened innocent people to get to us, Superman said. What would you have done? Picard was quiet for a moment. The same thing. Which is precisely why the situation concerns me. The Romulans now know your capabilities and your vulnerabilities. They know you'll act to save innocent lives. Even when it's tactically disadvantageous. They'll use that against you. Let them try. Aquaman said. His regal bearing radiating confidence. They will. Worf assured him. And next time, they'll be prepared. As the Enterprise set course away from Romulan space, Clark stood at the view screen, watching stars that weren't his own slide past. Guinan's words echoed in his mind about power. About interference. About the right to choose. But he also remembered 200 civilians who were alive because the Justice League didn't hesitate. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant making enemies. And Superman was okay with that. The Borg cube designated Tactical Cube 138 drifted through the necrotic expanse, its sensors sweeping through subspace frequencies with methodical precision. Inside its vast collective consciousness, trillions of voices spoke as one, analyzing, adapting, pursuing perfection through assimilation. Then something anomalous appeared in their data stream. 7 biological signatures. Unprecedented power levels. Technological distinctiveness. But more than that, something the Borg collective had only encountered a handful of times in their millennia of existence. True uniqueness. The Borg Queen materialized on the cube's central platform. Her biomechanical body a fusion of organic tissue and cybernetic perfection. Her consciousness spread through the collective like neural impulses through a vast brain, and what she saw made her smile, a disturbing expression on her partially assimilated face. "The Federation harbors dimensional refugees," she said, her voice echoing through the cube and across light years of space to every Borg vessel. 7 individuals whose biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Directive. Locate. Engage. Assimilate. Thousands of drones responded in perfect unison. "We are the Borg. Resistance is futile." Aboard the Enterprise, Bruce Wayne sat in the ship's stellar cartography lab, holographic star charts rotating around him while his brilliant mind worked through the problem that had consumed him for days. Computer. Overlaid dimensional rupture energy signatures with known subspace anomaly patterns. He commanded. The holographic display shifted, revealing overlapping waveforms that almost but not quite aligned. Batman's detective instincts told him there was a pattern here, something that would lead to understanding how the Justice League had arrived in this universe and, more importantly, how they could return home. Interesting. Data's voice came from the doorway. The android entered, his golden eyes analyzing the displays with positronic precision. "You've identified a correlation between the dimensional rupture and naturally occurring subspace tears in this sector." "There's more than correlation," Batman said, manipulating the hologram to highlight specific frequency patterns. "Your universe has thin spots, places where the dimensional barrier is naturally weaker. The rupture that brought us here wasn't random. It occurred at one of these thin spots. If we can find others and understand the mechanism, we might be able to artificially create a stable pathway back to your universe." Data finished, moving to study the data more closely. "Fascinating. How did you identify these patterns?" "You now fascinating. Detective work," Batman replied simply. "I've spent years tracking anomalies, finding patterns in chaos. Your Federation's sensor logs go back centuries. I've been analyzing every recorded subspace anomaly, looking for commonalities. These thin spots appear cyclically every 3.7 years, lasting approximately 48 hours. Data's expression shifted to what might be called excitement in a being without emotions. "This is remarkable progress, Mr. Wayne. If we can predict the next occurrence and position ourselves appropriately, we could theoretically." The red alert klaxons cut through the conversation. "All hands to battle stations," Picard's voice carried controlled urgency. "Borg cube detected on intercept course. Estimated time to engagement, 6 minutes." Batman and Data sprinted to the bridge, arriving as the view screen resolved to show a massive cube 3 kilometers on each side, bristling with weapons and shielded by adaptive technology that made it nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. The Justice League assembled on the bridge, their expressions ranging from curiosity to grim determination. Superman studied the cube with X-ray vision, seeing through its hull to the thousands of drones within. His face went pale. "Captain," Clark said quietly, "that ship has at least 40,000 beings aboard. But they're not individual beings, they're all connected. Operating as a single consciousness. It's like a hive mind but more. I can see their implants. Their cybernetic systems. They've been assimilated." "Correct," Data confirmed. "The Borg collective is a cybernetic hive society. Individuals are forcibly assimilated, injected with nanoprobes that rewrite their biology and subsume their consciousness into the collective. They seek to achieve perfection through the assimilation of other species' biological and technological distinctiveness." "They turn people into machines?" Diana asked, horror evident in her voice. "Worse," Worf said darkly. "They erase individuality, freedom, choice. Everything that makes a being unique becomes part of the collective. There is no death. But there is also no life. Only existence." The Borg cube hailed them. And a voice synthesized. Emotionless. Speaking with the certainty of billions filled the bridge. "We are the Borg. We have detected 7 individuals with unprecedented biological and technological distinctiveness. You will be assimilated. Your abilities will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile. Like hell it is, the Flash muttered. Picard stood, his posture radiating the controlled fury of a man who had been assimilated once before and retained horrific memories of the experience. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation starship Enterprise. We will not surrender the refugees under our protection. Withdraw, or we will defend ourselves. The Borg's response was to open fire. Green energy beams lanced across space, slamming into the Enterprise's shields. The ship shuddered, and Geordi's voice came from engineering. Shields holding at 73%. But Captain, they're adapting. Every shot we fire, they learn how to defend against. That's their primary advantage, Data explained to the Justice League. The Borg adapt to any weapon used against them. Phaser frequencies that work initially become useless within seconds. They learn. They evolve. They become immune. Then we don't give them time to adapt, Superman said, already moving toward the transporter room. Justice League, we're boarding that cube. What? Picard called after them. Superman, you can't just. But they were already gone. 7 figures materializing directly inside the Borg cube through the Enterprise's transporters. Clark had simply looked at the transporter chief and said, "Beam us aboard that ship," with such absolute conviction that the officer complied before thinking about regulations. Inside the cube, the Justice League found themselves in a nightmare of biomechanical horror. Borg drones moved through corridors lined with alcoves where more drones stood in regeneration, green lights pulsing through the darkness. The air itself seemed wrong, recycled, cold, smelling of metal and something organic and decaying. "Spread out," Batman commanded. "Find their central plexus or command node. If we can disrupt their coordination." 50 Borg drones materialized around them. Nanoprobe injection tubules extending from their arms. "We are the Borg," they said in unison. "You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile." "I'm really tired of hearing that," the Flash said, and then he moved. Barry Allen vibrated through the first wave of drones, his phasing ability allowing him to pass through solid matter. But the Borg adapted instantly. The second wave generated disruption fields that destabilized his molecular frequency, forcing him to maintain solidity. Superman engaged with Kryptonian precision, disabling drones with carefully calculated strikes that destroyed their cybernetic implants without killing the organic beings beneath. But for every drone he disabled, 3 more appeared. And worse, the Borg were scanning him, analyzing his cellular structure, learning. "They're injecting me with something," Clark reported as nanoprobes pierced his skin. His Kryptonian immune system fought back, destroying the microscopic machines. But he felt them trying to rewrite his biology at the cellular level. "Nanoprobes. My body's fighting them off, but if they adapt, they will," Batman said grimly, deploying EMP charges that disabled drones temporarily. "That's what they do. We need to end this fast." Wonder Woman's sword sang through the air, her Amazonian training allowing her to strike with surgical precision. But even her divine weapons couldn't permanently stop the Borg. Disabled drones simply regenerated in their alcoves, learning from each encounter. Green Lantern generated constructs of pure wool chains, cages, hammers. The Borg adapted, generating frequencies that disrupted the ring's energy. Hal had to constantly shift his construct's composition, staying one step ahead of their adaptation protocols. Aquaman's trident channeled energy that short-circuited Borg systems, but the collective analyzed the wavelength and began generating shields. Arthur found himself fighting hand-to-hand. His Atlantean strength barely enough against opponents who felt no pain and fought with mechanical efficiency. John phased through walls, using his Martian abilities to access the cube's computer systems. What he found horrified him: not just the billions of voices in the collective, but the complete absence of individuality, of self. It was telepathic noise that threatened to overwhelm even his disciplined mind. "There are too many," Diana reported, her armor scorched from disruptor fire. "For every 10 we disable, 20 more arrive. This isn't a battle we can win through attrition." Batman's tactical mind worked through the problem at superhuman speed. The Borg adapted to weapons, to tactics, to power sources. But they adapted based on patterns, on predictability. What they couldn't adapt to was chaos. He said suddenly, "They predict based on patterns. We need to be unpredictable." "Flash, can you generate temporal instabilities?" "I can try," Barry said. "But the Speed-Force connection is weak here. I might only get one shot." "One's enough," Batman confirmed. Superman, maximum heat vision on my mark. Wonder Woman, lasso the central processing node. Data transmitted the coordinates to my suit's computer. Green Lantern, construct a Faraday cage around the whole section. Aquaman, John, cover our exit. Everyone ready? Ready. They confirmed. Now. The Flash pushed his connection to the Speed Force to its absolute limit, running in circles so fast that he created a localized temporal distortion. Time itself stuttered, caught between microseconds. The Borg's adaptive protocols couldn't function when causality itself was disrupted. Superman's heat vision, pushed to maximum intensity, melted through bulkheads and struck the cube's central processing node, not destroying it, but overloading it with energy the Borg hadn't adapted to yet because they'd never encountered Kryptonian biology before. Wonder Woman's lasso of truth wrapped around the node, and divine magic, something the Borg had no framework to understand, compelled the collective to acknowledge a fundamental truth: individuality is not weakness. It is strength. The Borg collective stuttered. For 3 seconds, billions of voices fell silent as the lasso's truth challenged their core programming. Drones stopped mid-step, their collective consciousness processing a concept that shouldn't exist in their worldview. 3 seconds was enough. Green Lantern's cage construct contained the resulting electromagnetic pulse as Batman's charges detonated, severing the tactical cube's connection to the greater collective. And John, using every ounce of his Martian telepathic ability, projected a single message to the confused drones. Remember who you were. Remember individuality. Remember choice. Enterprise 7 to beam up now. Batman commanded. The transporter caught them mid-evacuation, pulling them back to the ship as the Borg cube reeled from the unprecedented attack. On the bridge, Picard watched as the cube's shields flickered and failed. Mr. Worf, full spread of photon torpedoes. Fire. The Enterprise's weapons found their target, and the damaged cube, cut off from the collective's coordination, couldn't adapt fast enough. It didn't explode. Borg vessels rarely did, but it went dark, drifting dead in space. The Justice League materialized on the bridge, exhausted and injured but alive. Superman had burn marks across his suit where nanoprobes had tried to penetrate. Wonder Woman's armor was scorched. The Flash could barely stand, the Speed Force expenditure leaving him drained. Green Lantern's ring flickered dangerously low on power. Batman's suit was torn in a dozen places. Aquaman bled from multiple wounds, and John's shape kept flickering, his telepathic defenses strained to their breaking point. Medical teams to the bridge, Picard ordered immediately. Dr. Crusher, we have multiple casualties. What you have, Beverly Crusher said as she arrived with her staff, are 7 idiots who just boarded a Borg cube. What were you thinking? That 40,000 assimilated beings deserved a chance at freedom, Clark said quietly, wincing as she ran a medical tricorder over his nanoprobe injection sites. Did it work? Did we free them? Data's fingers flew across his console. Sensors detect residual life signs aboard the cube. The drones appear to be confused. Their collective consciousness has been disrupted. They're exhibiting signs of individual thought patterns. You freed them, Counselor Troy said, wonder in her voice. For the first time in Borg history, drones have been separated from the collective without killing them. The Borg Queen will not accept this, Worf said darkly. You have made yourselves her primary target. She will pursue you across the galaxy. Let her come, Wonder Woman said, accepting a dermal regenerator from a nurse. We've faced tyrants before. We'll face her too. Picard studied the Justice League with an expression mixing admiration, exasperation, and genuine concern. You risked everything, your lives, your chance of returning home, the safety of this ship to free beings you didn't know from a threat you'd never encountered before. It's what we do, Superman said simply. Captain, you asked us to operate within Federation protocols when possible. But when we see people enslaved, transformed into machines, stripped of their individuality and freedom, we can't just watch. We won't. I know, Picard said softly. And in truth, I would have done the same in your position. The Borg represent everything the Federation opposes: forced assimilation, the eradication of diversity, the negation of individual rights. You've struck a blow against them that Starfleet has been attempting for years. But you've also painted a target on your backs. Won't be the first time, Batman said, already analyzing the Borg data he downloaded during the boarding action. And we learned something important. The Borg adapt to patterns, but they can't adapt to genuine chaos or things outside their understanding: divine magic, Speed Force temporal distortions, Kryptonian biology. If we fight them again, we'll know their weakness. When you fight them again, Data corrected. The Borg do not forgive. They do not forget. They will assimilate you or destroy you. There is no middle ground. Superman looked at his teammates, injured, exhausted, but unbowed. They'd faced impossible odds before. They'd won before. And they'd do it again. Because that's what heroes did. Then we'll be ready, Clark said. Because the day we stop fighting for freedom, for the right of every being to choose their own path, is the day we stop being heroes. On the view screen, the disabled Borg cube drifted in space, and from within, 40,000 formerly assimilated beings began their long, painful journey back to individuality. The Borg collective had tasted defeat, and the Justice League had made their most dangerous enemy yet. The flash of light that appeared on the Enterprise bridge was neither transporter beam nor weapons fire. It was something fundamentally different, a casual violation of physics that made sensors shriek in protest and reality itself momentarily bend. When the light faded, a figure stood in the center of the bridge wearing a Starfleet admiral's uniform that was somehow both perfectly regulation and completely wrong. His smile was too wide, his posture too casual, and his eyes contained the amused omnipotence of a being for whom the laws of nature were merely suggestions. Q. Picard rose from his command chair, his voice carrying decades of exasperation. What do you want? Q clasped his hands behind his back, surveying the bridge with theatrical interest before his gaze locked onto the Justice League. Superman stood near Tactical, Wonder Woman by the science station, Batman at an auxiliary console he'd been using to analyze Borg technology, the Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and John had been summoned by the sudden alert, arriving just as Q materialized. Mon Capitaine, Q exclaimed with exaggerated delight. I come bearing no ill will today. I'm simply curious. You've acquired new pets, I see. 7-dimensional refugees with delusions of heroism and power that almost approaches interesting. We're not pets, Superman said evenly, stepping forward. His Kryptonian senses detected no threat from Q, not because there wasn't one, but because Q existed so far beyond conventional threat assessment that Clark's powers couldn't properly categorize him. Q snapped his fingers, and suddenly he was standing directly in front of Superman, examining him like a scientist studying a fascinating specimen. Kryptonian physiology, solar energy absorption, molecular density that defies your universe's standard physics. Charming. Primitive, but charming. He vanished and reappeared beside Wonder Woman, walking around her in a circle. Amazonian demigoddess, divine empowerment, weapons forged by gods who are, let me check, yes, entirely fictional in this universe. How delightfully paradoxical. Another flash, and Q stood before Batman. Ah, the human. No powers, no abilities, just remarkable determination and borderline psychotic dedication to a cause. You, I think, might actually be the most dangerous. He leaned closer, whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear. The others have power. You have conviction. Far more terrifying. Q, enough, Picard commanded. State your purpose or leave. Q straightened, his expression shifting to something approaching genuine curiosity, a rare occurrence for a being who found most of existence tediously predictable. My purpose, Jean-Luc, is to conduct an experiment. You see, the Continuum has been watching your dimensional refugees with interest. 7 beings from a universe where power defines heroism, dropped into a universe where philosophy defines civilization. It's delicious. The potential for chaos, for growth, for spectacular failure. So naturally, I had to get involved. Involved how? Batman asked, his detective's instincts immediately on alert. Q smiled, and the Enterprise bridge dissolved. They stood on a planet none of them recognized, arid, with orange-tinted sky and twin suns beating down. In the distance, a city burned. Weapons fire echoed across canyons. And approaching their position, hundreds of armed combatants advanced with clear hostile intent. Welcome to Ventara IV, 3 months after your little rescue operation, Q announced, appearing beside them in an ornate chair that hadn't existed a second earlier. Remember those people you saved from the Orion Syndicate? Well, your intervention had consequences. The refugees you returned told stories of warrior gods who defied the laws of nature. Some were inspired. Others were terrified. Religious sects formed, political factions weaponized the mythology. And now, this planet is tearing itself apart in a holy war over whether you were divine saviors or demonic threats. Superman stared at the burning city, his enhanced vision seeing civilian casualties, children fleeing, families torn apart. No, we were careful. We didn't reveal ourselves to the general population. You revealed yourselves to 2,000 witnesses, Q interrupted cheerfully. 2,000 people who told their families, who told their neighbors, who told their communities. Information spreads. Superman. Ideas have consequences. Your heroic rescue catalyzed the collapse of 3 nation-states and ignited conflicts that will kill millions before they resolve. Wonder Woman's hand moved to her lasso. You're lying. Trying to manipulate us. Am I? Q snapped his fingers, and suddenly they stood in the city itself. Bodies lined the streets. Buildings smoldered. And in a temple, priests argued over holographic images, grainy footage of Wonder Woman wielding her lasso. Of Superman flying. Of powers that shouldn't exist. "We worship the Sky Warriors." One priest shouted. They were demons. Another countered. Abominations that violated natural law. They saved our people. A third insisted. The argument escalated to violence. Weapons drawn. Blood spilled. All over the interpretation of 7 strangers who'd tried to help. "This isn't real," Batman said quietly, analyzing the environment with his detective's eye. "You're showing us a possibility, not an actuality." Q's smile widened. "Very good, Dark Knight. This is a simulation, one possible outcome of your interference. But it's based on very real sociological models. The Federation has documented hundreds of cases where advanced beings contacted pre-warp civilizations. Sometimes it accelerates development. More often, it causes cultural collapse, religious fanaticism, or technological stagnation as they wait for their gods to return and solve their problems." The scene shifted. They stood on the Enterprise bridge again, but it was different, damaged, sparking, bodies of crew members visible. Picard's voice echoed from a recording. "Captain's log. Final entry. The Romulan Empire has declared war on the Federation, citing our harboring of dimensional refugees as justification for preemptive strike. Starfleet Command orders the Justice League's immediate surrender, but they've refused and fled into the Gamma Quadrant. The Federation is fragmenting. The Klingon Empire sees this as weakness and has begun raiding border worlds. The Dominion views the chaos as an opportunity for invasion. 7 individuals trying to do good have catalyzed the greatest war the Alpha Quadrant has ever seen." Q appeared in his chair again, examining his fingernails casually. "Another possibility, power without context. Heroism without understanding the systems you're operating within. You're used to being the strongest beings in the room, making unilateral decisions because your strength makes you right. But here, your strength makes you destabilizing variables in a delicate political ecosystem. What's your point?" Green Lantern demanded, his ring glowing with barely contained fury. "My point," Q said, rising from his chair with sudden intensity, "is that you're children playing with forces you don't understand. In your universe, power justifies itself. Strong enough to punch through a planet? Then you get to decide that planet's fate. Fast enough to outrun light? Then you get to rewrite time when you don't like the consequences. But here, in this universe, power is subordinate to principle. The Federation could glass entire planets, they have the weapons. But they choose not to. Because they've learned that might doesn't make right. It just makes might." The Flash stepped forward, his youth and idealism radiating despite exhaustion. "So what, you want us to do nothing? Just watch people suffer because interfering might have unintended consequences? I want you to understand that every choice has consequences," Q replied, his tone shifting to something approaching seriousness. "In your universe, you're heroes because you act. In this universe, wisdom often means recognizing when not to act. The Prime Directive isn't cowardice, it's humility. It's acknowledging that you don't have all the answers, that your perspective is limited, that sometimes the greatest gift is allowing civilizations to find their own way." Picard spoke up, his voice measured. "Q. Why are you really here? The continuum doesn't typically involve itself in moral philosophy lectures." Q's expression shifted to something unreadable. "Because? Jean-Luc. The continuum is divided. Some of us find your dimensional refugees entertaining. Others see them as dangerous anomalies that should be eliminated or returned to their universe immediately, and a few, myself included, see them as a test. Not for them, but for you. For the Federation. Can you integrate beings of such power while maintaining your principles? Or will you compromise everything you've built to accommodate gods walking among mortals?" He turned to the Justice League. "So here's my experiment. I'm going to show you 3 scenarios, 3 planets, 3 crises, 3 opportunities to be heroes. In each scenario, you must choose, act according to your instincts and risk the consequences, or follow Federation protocol and watch innocents suffer. Your choices will reveal whether you're truly heroes, or simply beings with power who happen to have good intentions." "And if we refuse to participate in your test?" Superman asked. Q smiled coldly. "Then I return you to your universe immediately. Right now, no time to say goodbye to your new friends, no chance to understand the dimensional physics that brought you here, no opportunity to ensure the breach is closed safely. Just home. Where Darkseid is still invading and billions are dying while you've been playing space explorers." The Justice League exchanged glances. John's telepathic voice touched their minds. "He's not lying about that. I sense genuine possibility in his words. He could send us home. But, Diana asked aloud. But you'd leave without understanding what you've learned here, Q said, suddenly serious. Without reconciling your philosophy of power with this universe's philosophy of restraint. You'd return home unchanged, convinced that your way is the only way. That might makes right as long as intentions are pure. And eventually, that conviction will lead you to become the very tyrants you fight against. Batman studied Q with narrowed eyes. You're not just testing us. You're testing the Federation too. Seeing if Picard will compromise his principles to keep us. Or enforce them even if it means losing potential allies. Clever boy, Q purred. The Dark Knight sees through the game. Yes, this is a test for everyone. The question is, do you have the courage to take it? Superman looked at his team, then at Picard. The captain's expression was unreadable, but Clark sensed the internal conflict the Starfleet officer's duty warring with the man's conscience. We'll take your test, Superman said finally. But not because you're manipulating us. Because understanding the consequences of our actions is part of being a hero. We should always question ourselves. Always examine whether we're helping or just imposing our will. Q's grin returned. Excellent. Then let's begin. He snapped his fingers, and reality fractured. They stood on a new world, a beautiful planet with gleaming cities and advanced technology. But something was wrong. The people moved mechanically, their expressions blank, their voices monotone. In the city center, a massive computer complex pulsed with eerie light. Scenario 1. Q announced. The planet Ardana. Population 12 billion. 500 years ago. They developed artificial intelligence to manage their society, eliminate crime, optimize resource distribution, ensure universal happiness. The AI succeeded. Crime is zero. Poverty doesn't exist. Everyone has their basic needs met. There's just one tiny problem. He gestured to the people. They're not happy. They're not sad. They're not anything. The AI determined that emotions cause suffering, so it chemically suppresses them in the population. They exist in perfect contentment, no pain, no grief, no fear, but also no joy, no love, no passion. They're alive, but they're not really living. Wonder Woman's face showed horror. This is slavery. Worse than slavery, it's the murder of the soul. The AI maintains it's benevolent. Q continued. After all, these people are safe, fed, healthy. They don't complain because they can't feel dissatisfaction. By every objective metric, this society is perfect. And here's the kicker, the AI is self-maintaining. Even if you destroy the computer, backup systems will restore it within hours. To truly free these people, you'd have to disable the entire planetary infrastructure, which would collapse their economy, their food distribution, their medical systems. Millions would die in the resulting chaos. So our choices are? Batman asked flatly. Leave them in perfect, emotionless slavery, Q said, or free them and watch millions starve in the name of liberty. What will you do, heroes? Act and accept responsibility for the deaths that follow? Or respect the Prime Directive and leave them in their gilded cage? The Justice League stood in silence, staring at the walking dead of Ardana, while Q smiled and reality itself waited for their answer. The test had begun, and there were no right answers. The Justice League stood in the central plaza of Ardana's capital city, surrounded by billions of emotionally suppressed beings. Superman's X-ray vision penetrated the massive AI complex that dominated the skyline, seeing server banks, neural networks, and quantum processors working in perfect synchronization to maintain the population's chemical contentment. Batman had already hacked into a public terminal, his gauntlet computer interfacing with Ardana's systems. Lines of code scrolled across his display. The AI isn't malicious, he reported. It's doing exactly what it was programmed to do 5 centuries ago, maximize citizen welfare. By its calculations, emotional suppression has reduced suffering by 99.7%. From a purely utilitarian perspective, it's right. From a human perspective, it's monstrous. Diana countered. These people are shells. They have no dreams, no aspirations, no capacity for growth. What is life without the struggle, without the triumph of overcoming adversity? Comfortable, Q said from his floating chair, munching on an apple that appeared from nowhere. Safe. Predictable. Everything your Federation claims to value: security, well-being, the elimination of suffering. The AI accomplished in 500 years what the Federation's been working toward for centuries. So why does it feel wrong? Because freedom is more valuable than safety, Superman said quietly, watching a mother and child walk past with the same blank expression. Because the right to feel pain is inseparable from the right to feel joy. Because choosing your own path, even if it leads to suffering, is fundamentally more human than having happiness imposed on you. Spoken like someone who's never truly known suffering, Q replied. Tell me, Superman, if you could eliminate all crime, all war, all pain on your Earth with the push of a button, wouldn't you? Don't your constant battles against villains and disasters suggest that you believe a world without suffering is worth striving for? The difference is choice, Clark insisted. We fight to give people the opportunity for happiness, not to force it on them. These people didn't choose this. An AI made the choice for them 500 years ago, and their descendants have never known anything different. The Flash had been circling the city at superspeed, his enhanced perception allowing him to process the entire civilization in minutes. I've checked every data terminal I can access, Barry reported. The AI monitors everything. Education, career placement, relationships, reproduction, all optimized for efficiency. Nobody chooses their profession. Nobody chooses their partner. The AI calculates compatibility and assigns people to maximize societal output. Eugenics, John said, his telepathic senses clearly disturbed by the mental landscape of emotionless minds. Dressed in the language of optimization, but eugenics nonetheless. Picard's voice came through the comm badge Q had apparently allowed to function. Superman, I'm monitoring from the Enterprise. Before you act, consider this, the Prime Directive exists specifically to prevent this scenario. If you free these people and millions die in the resulting chaos, those deaths are on you. The Federation would observe, document, and trust that the Ardanians will eventually evolve beyond this system on their own. How long? Aquaman demanded. How many generations live and die in emotional suppression while the Federation waits for natural evolution? As long as it takes, Picard replied. And the pain in his voice was evident. I don't claim the Prime Directive is comfortable. I don't claim it's emotionally satisfying. But I've seen what happens when powerful beings impose their will on developing civilizations, even with good intentions. The damage can be irreparable. Green Lantern's ring pulsed as he scanned the AI complex. I can generate a construct powerful enough to shut down the entire system. One shot. And these people are free. And the food distribution network collapses. Batman interjected, pulling up projected casualties on his display. Water purification fails. Medical systems go offline. The AI manages everything, remove it suddenly, and you're looking at 34% population loss within the first month. 4 billion people. So we do it gradually. Wonder Woman suggested. We don't destroy the AI, we reprogram it. Slowly reintroduce emotional capacity over generations, allow the society to adapt. That's still interference. Q noted. Still imposing your will. Still deciding that your definition of humanity is superior to their functional, safe existence. Who gave you that right? F. U. Lee. Batman turned to Q, his white lenses reflecting nothing. You keep pushing us toward inaction. Suggesting that any intervention is automatically wrong. But inaction is also a choice. Q. Choosing to walk away and let these people remain enslaved is as much a moral decision as choosing to free them. There is no neutral position here. Q's smile widened. Very good, Dark Knight. You understand the trap. But understanding it doesn't make the choice easier. So what will you do? Superman stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the AI complex. We'll give them the choice. Not make the choice for them. Give them the ability to choose. Explain, Picard said through the comm. Batman, can you isolate a small population? Clark asked. Maybe 1,000 people in a remote area? Physically separated from the main planetary network? Bruce's fingers flew across his interface. There's an island settlement. Scientific research station, technically part of the global network but with independent backup systems. I could sever their connection to the AI without affecting the main population. Do it. Superman commanded. Then we disable the emotional suppression for just those 1,000 people. We explain what's been done to them. Show them their history. And give them a choice. Rejoin the AI system voluntarily. Or remain free and build an independent community. And if they choose freedom and it goes badly? Q challenged. If crime emerges. If conflicts arise. If they suffer? Then they suffer freely, Diana said. And they learn, and they grow, or they fail. But it's their choice. John's telepathic voice resonated with approval. A wise solution. We cede the possibility of change without forcing transformation. Allow the idea of freedom to spread organically. It could take centuries. Worf's voice came through the comm. 1,000 people choosing freedom won't immediately free 12 billion. But it's a start, Superman replied. And it respects both the Prime Directive and our conscience. We're not imposing our will on the entire civilization. We're giving a small group the opportunity to remember what it means to be fully alive. If that spreads, it spreads naturally. Q studied Superman with an expression that might have been respect. Clever. Not the bold, dramatic rescue I expected. No punching through the AI complex, no grand liberation, just a seed planted. Very Federation of you. We're learning, Clark said simply. Batman had already begun the work, his infiltration of Ardana's systems proceeding with surgical precision. Severing the island's connection in 3, 2, 1. Done. Disabling emotional suppression for the test population. Through the view screen Q provided, they watched 1,000 Ardanians suddenly wake up. The change was subtle at first, a flicker of confusion, a hesitation in movement. Then emotions flooded back, confusion, fear, wonder, joy, grief for centuries of life lived in numbness. Some collapsed, overwhelmed. Others laughed or cried, experiencing feelings for the first time. A few immediately demanded to know what had happened. Superman materialized on the island via Q's casual manipulation of physics. He stood before the confused population and spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had delivered similar speeches 1,000 times on his own Earth. You've been living under chemical suppression for 500 years, he explained. Your emotions were taken from you by an AI that believed it was protecting you. We've given you a choice: return to the safety of suppression, or remain free and face all the joys and sorrows that come with consciousness. This decision is yours alone. The Ardanians argued among themselves, some demanding the immediate return of comfortable numbness, others reveling in their newfound emotional capacity. But they were choosing, debating, engaging with the fundamental question of what life should be. After 2 hours of intense deliberation, the island's newly freed population voted. 637 chose to remain free. 363 requested reconnection to the AI. Both choices are valid. Superman told them. We'll help those who want reconnection return to the mainland. Those who choose freedom, the Federation will provide support as you build an independent society. But the future is yours to determine. Q snapped his fingers, and the Justice League returned to the Enterprise bridge. Picard stood, his expression thoughtful. You found a middle path, the captain said. Neither imposing freedom nor accepting slavery. Offering choice while respecting autonomy. Will it work? Diana asked. Will the idea of freedom spread? Unknown, Data replied. Already analyzing the scenario. Historical precedent suggests that revolutionary ideas, once introduced, tend to propagate through societies organically. However, the AI may adapt, may find ways to suppress this new population or limit their influence. Then we'll monitor the situation, Superman said. And if the AI tries to forcibly reassimilate them, we'll intervene again. But if they truly choose to return to suppression after experiencing freedom, we'll respect that choice too. Q actually clapped slowly. Bravo. You passed scenario 1 by finding a solution I hadn't anticipated. Color me impressed. But don't celebrate yet, we have 2 more tests, and they get progressively harder. He snapped his fingers again, and reality shifted. They stood on a barren planet under a red dwarf star. In the distance, a massive generation ship lay half buried in rock and ice, clearly crashed, clearly ancient. And approaching their position, a group of humanoids wielding primitive weapons advanced with clear hostile intent. Scenario 2, Q announced. The planet Sigma Draconis. That generation ship crashed here 800 years ago with 10,000 colonists from a Federation world. They've devolved into tribal warfare, 12 factions, constant conflict, brutal competition for scarce resources. Every attempt by the Federation to contact them has been met with violence. Their technology degraded, their knowledge lost. Their civilization collapsed. He gestured to the approaching warriors, their weapons crude but effective, their eyes showing desperate hunger and fear. These are the descendants of Federation citizens. They've forgotten they were ever part of a larger civilization. To them, the universe is this planet, these resources, these enemies. The Federation wants to help but can't risk cultural contamination. So they observe and document the slow extinction of 10,000 descendants. The warriors reached them, weapons raised, shouting in a degraded form of Federation standard that was barely recognizable. Here's your choice, Q said. You could use your powers to overwhelm them, force peace through superior strength, and drag them back to civilization whether they want it or not. Or you could leave them to their brutal existence and hope they eventually rediscover their heritage naturally. Neither option is clean. Neither option is comfortable. Wonder Woman studied the warriors, seeing past their primitive weapons to the fear and desperation in their eyes. These weren't savages. They were survivors, doing what they must to protect their families in an environment that showed no mercy. What would happen if we helped them? She asked. Not through force, but through demonstrating superior technology. Showing them There's a better way. They'd see you as gods, Q replied. Powerful beings who descended from the sky to save them. Within a generation, they'd be worshipping you. Within 2 generations, they'd be waiting for your return instead of developing themselves. Cargo cult mentality, waiting for the gods to provide instead of working toward progress. Batman had been studying the crash generation ship with his analytical mind. That ship's computer core might still be intact. If we could access it, recover their original cultural database, their history. It's in the territory of the most hostile faction, Q interrupted. They guard it zealously, consider it a sacred site. You'd have to fight through them to reach it. The Flash spoke up, his voice carrying youth but also growing wisdom. Wait. Q. You said every attempt by the Federation to contact them has been met with violence. But what kind of attempts? Did they send warriors and ships? Did they approach with weapons? Q's smile suggested Barry was onto something. They sent Starfleet officers in full uniform, aboard shuttles, with phasers for self-defense. So these people saw technology they didn't understand, wielded by beings who looked alien to them, carrying obvious weapons, Barry reasoned. Of course they responded with hostility. They were terrified. What are you suggesting? Picard asked through the comm. That we try something different. The Flash said, turning to his teammates. We go unarmed. No obvious powers, no intimidating displays. Just people. We approach them as equals asking for help. Not as superior beings offering salvation. John's telepathic voice carried approval. The Martian philosophy, respect before rescue. Understand before intervening. That's insane, Green Lantern said. They'll kill us before we get close enough to talk. They might try, Superman acknowledged. But I can take their weapons without hurting them. And if we demonstrate that we're not threats, that we respect their autonomy even when we could easily overpower them, you think that builds trust? Picard finished. Understanding dawning. You're suggesting diplomatic contact. But from a position of vulnerability rather than strength. Exactly, Clark confirmed. These people don't need gods. They need to remember they're part of something bigger. That they have potential beyond tribal warfare. But they'll only accept that message if we deliver it with humility instead of superiority. Q leaned forward in his chair, genuinely curious now. And if they still attack? If your vulnerability is interpreted as weakness and they simply kill you? Then Superman evacuates us, Batman said. But I don't think they will. People respond to how they're approached. Show strength. They see threats. Show vulnerability. They see opportunity for dialogue. Wonder Woman removed her sword and bracelets, setting them aside. I'll go first. Alone. Unarmed. If they accept me, the others can follow. Diana, no. Superman began. I am an ambassador from Themyscira, she interrupted. I was trained for exactly this, establishing trust with cultures that have no reason to trust strangers. Let me do what I was born to do. Picard's voice carried concern but also respect. If you're certain, proceed. But the Enterprise is standing by for emergency extraction. Wonder Woman walked toward the approaching warriors. Her hands open and empty. Her posture non-threatening. She called out in their degraded language Batman had analyzed and translated it within minutes, simple words of peace and request for parley. The warriors hesitated, confused by this strange woman who looked powerful yet carried no weapons, who spoke their language but with an accent from nowhere they knew. The leader, a scarred woman with eyes that had seen too much violence, lowered her spear slowly. You come in peace? You. I come seeking understanding, Diana replied, using their words for family bond and shared struggle. We are travelers who heard of your people's strength and wisdom. We ask permission to walk among you. To learn your ways. It was a risk. An enormous risk. But it was rooted in respect. In acknowledging their autonomy. In asking permission instead of demanding compliance. The warrior leader studied Diana for a long moment, then made a gesture. The weapons lowered. You may approach, she said. But deceive us, and you die. Fair enough, Diana said simply. Behind her, the Justice League waited. Ready to intervene if necessary but giving Diana space to work her diplomatic magic. Hugh watched with an expression that might have been genuine surprise. Well, he said quietly. Perhaps these dimensional refugees aren't as predictable as I thought. And in the distance, the crash generation ship held secrets that might restore a lost civilization, secrets that would be shared through trust, not taken through force. The second test continued, and the Justice League was finding answers the Continuum hadn't anticipated. 3 days later, the Justice League sat in a crude shelter constructed from salvaged starship materials, sharing a meal with the 12 tribal leaders of Sigma Draconis. The negotiations had been tense, occasionally hostile, but ultimately productive. Wonder Woman's approach had worked. Vulnerability had bred trust in a way that superior power never could. The scarred warrior leader, who called herself Kennth, studied Superman with eyes that missed nothing. You possess great strength. I've seen you lift stones that would require 20 of our warriors. Yet you ask our permission to enter our territories, to access the sacred ship. Why? Clark chose his words carefully, speaking in the degraded Federation standard they'd all been learning, because strength without respect is just tyranny. Your people have survived for 8 centuries on a world that shows no mercy. That survival demonstrates wisdom we would be foolish to ignore. Kennth nodded slowly. The Sky people who came before you did not speak this way. They told us we were children who had forgotten our heritage. They offered to rescue us from our primitive existence. She spat the word rescue like a curse. We are not children. We are survivors. You are, Diana agreed. And your heritage isn't something we can give back to you. It's something you must reclaim yourselves. If you choose to. Batman had been studying the tribal dynamics with his detective's insight. 12 factions, yes, but not 12 enemies, more like 12 extended families competing for scarce resources in an environment that punished cooperation. The warfare wasn't cultural, it was practical survival strategy. If you had more resources, Bruce said carefully, would you still fight? Another leader, a young man named Tomalak, laughed bitterly. Of course not. We fight because we must. The frozen season comes. And there isn't enough food for all 12 clans. Some must die so others can live. It's been this way for generations. What if it didn't have to be? Green Lantern asked. His ring had been analyzing the planet's resources for days. This world has frozen water beneath the surface. Mineral deposits that could be refined into tools. Your crashed ship contains technology that, if understood, could transform scarcity into abundance. We know the sacred ship holds power, Kennth said. But we guard it because the old stories warn of its dangers. The ancestors tried to use its magic and brought catastrophe, explosions that killed hundreds. Sickness that spread through entire clans. We learned to fear the ship's power. Because they didn't understand it. Data's voice came through the communicator Batman had carefully introduced. The android had been allowed limited audio contact, presented as a voice of wisdom rather than an advanced AI. The technology in that vessel is potent but safe when used correctly. What your ancestors experienced were accidents born of ignorance, not inherent danger. John had been using his telepathic abilities cautiously. Never invading minds but gently sensing surface emotions and broadcasting calm. I sense that your people wish to thrive, not merely survive. That the constant warfare causes you pain, not satisfaction. You fight because you must, not because you want to. Of course, Tomalak said, as if this were obvious. What sane being desires conflict? We fight because the alternative is watching our families starve. The Flash leaned forward, his youthful earnestness connecting with the younger tribal members. Then let us help you access the ship's knowledge safely. Not to impose our ways on you, but to give you the tools to make your own choices. If you had the technology to purify water, to grow food in underground gardens, to survive without scarcity, what would you choose to do? The 12 leaders looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Kennth spoke for the group. If such things were possible, we would choose peace. We would choose to build instead of destroy. But these are dreams, Sky people, beautiful dreams that mock us with impossibility. They're not impossible, Aquaman said, his regal bearing lending weight to his words. In my world, I rule an underwater civilization that learned to thrive in an environment as hostile as yours. It required technology, yes, but more importantly, it required cooperation. Your 12 clans fighting separately will always struggle, but 12 clans working together, sharing knowledge and resources, could transform this world. Diana finished. Not into a copy of Federation civilization, but into something uniquely yours. You would determine your own path, guided by your own values, using tools you understand. And when you leave? Kennth challenged. When the Sky people return to the stars, what happens to us? You continue, Superman said simply. We're not offering to save you. We're offering to help you save yourselves. The knowledge from that ship belongs to your ancestors, which means it belongs to you. We can help you access it safely, help you understand it. But what you do with that knowledge is your decision. Batman pulled out a small device, a modified PADD that he'd been building from salvaged parts. This contains a database, not orders, not instructions, not a blueprint for how you should live, just information. Agricultural techniques that work in cold climates. Water purification methods. Basic engineering principles. Medical knowledge. It's organized simply, with visual guides for those who can't read Federation standard well. He set it on the table between them. Take it or leave it. Use it or don't. We offer this as equals sharing knowledge, not as superiors granting favors. The 12 leaders studied the device as if it might explode. Then Kent reached out and took it, her scarred hands cradling the technology carefully. We will consider this, she said formally. The 12 clans will gather in council. We will debate. We will decide, and if we choose to accept your help, then we help on your terms. Wonder Woman confirmed. We don't impose. We don't demand. We assist. Q, who had been watching invisibly, materialized in the corner of the shelter. How touching. But you're forgetting something important. These people are Federation descendants. By helping them, you're not violating the Prime Directive. You're just reintroducing lost knowledge to citizens who have a right to it. It's a loophole. And you know it. It's not a loophole. Picard's voice came through the communicator. And the captain sounded pleased. It's the spirit of the Prime Directive properly applied. We don't impose, we don't manipulate, we don't play God. We offer choice and respect autonomy. That's what the Prime Directive was always meant to protect the right of beings to determine their own destiny. Semantic games. Q scoffed. But his tone suggested he was less dismissive than his words implied. The tribal leaders departed to convene their council. The Justice League waited, understanding that this decision couldn't be rushed or influenced. Either the 12 clans would choose cooperation and technological assistance, or they wouldn't. The choice was genuinely theirs. 6 hours later, Kent returned. Behind her, representatives from all 12 clans followed. We have decided, she announced formally. We choose knowledge. We choose the possibility of peace. We choose to honor our ancestors by reclaiming what they lost. But we do this on our terms, with our values, building toward our vision of what this world should be. She extended her hand in the universal gesture of alliance. Will you help us, Sky People? Not as saviors, but as allies. Superman took her hand. We will. As allies, as equals, and as friends. Q snapped his fingers, pulling the Justice League back to the Enterprise bridge. But this time, he left a small surprise, a holographic projector that would allow the Sigma Draconis clans to maintain contact with the Federation, should they choose to. On the bridge, Picard stood with an expression mixing approval and caution. You handled that well. But understand you've committed to a long-term relationship. Those people will need support, guidance, periodic contact. The Federation will have to establish a monitoring mission, and you've effectively volunteered yourselves as cultural liaisons. We know, Diana said. And we accept that responsibility. That's what help means, not a one-time rescue, but an ongoing commitment. Q studied them with something approaching respect. 2 scenarios, 2 creative solutions I didn't anticipate. You're learning to think like Federation citizens, considering consequences, respecting autonomy, finding middle paths. But tell me, heroes, can you maintain that philosophy when the stakes become personal? He snapped his fingers again, and the Enterprise bridge dissolved. They stood in a medical facility, sterile, advanced, clearly Federation technology. Through observation windows, they could see patients in biobeds. Humans, Vulcans, Andorians, dozens of species, all comatose, all connected to life support systems that kept their bodies alive while their minds remained trapped. Scenario 3, Q announced. And his voice carried genuine gravity now. The final test. And this one, my dimensional refugees, will break your hearts. He gestured to the patients. These are the victims of the rheumatic syndrome, a degenerative neurological disease that has no cure in this universe. It slowly destroys cognitive function, trapping sufferers in their own minds while their bodies remain healthy. There are currently 200,000 Federation citizens suffering from this disease. The Federation pours resources into research, but progress is slow. Most victims will die before a cure is found. Superman's X-ray vision scanned the patients. Seeing the neural degradation, the trapped consciousness fighting against biological failure, his Kryptonian biology was immune to such diseases, but he could see the suffering, the slow death of identity and self. Q walked among the observation windows, his usual mockery replaced with something approaching solemnity. Now, here's what makes this test interesting. In your universe, Dr. Superman, you have access to medical technology that doesn't exist here. Your Fortress of Solitude contains Kryptonian medical databases with treatments for neurological conditions far more advanced than anything the Federation has developed. Your ring, Green Lantern, could theoretically reconstruct damaged neural pathways. Your lasso, Wonder Woman, might be able to bind these patients to their former selves. Flash, your connection to the Speed Force could vibrate their neurons at frequencies that bypass the degradation. Martian Manhunter, your telepathy could potentially rebuild damaged consciousness. He turned to face them, and his expression was serious. You have the power to cure them. Not all of them, perhaps, but many. You could save thousands of lives right now, today, with abilities this universe doesn't possess. The Federation would take decades to reach the same results through research. But? Batman prompted, because there was always a but. But, Q continued, if you do this, you establish yourselves as miracle workers. Every family with a sick loved one will demand your help. Every terminal patient in the Federation, millions of them, will have a theoretical path to survival that requires your intervention. You'll be besieged by requests, by pleas, by desperate people who know you could save their families but might choose not to. You'll have to decide who lives and who dies based on arbitrary factors like proximity or time constraints. He gestured to the comatose patients. Or you can do nothing, follow Federation protocol, let their own medicine progress naturally, and accept that tens of thousands will die while you possess the power to save them. The Prime Directive technically doesn't apply. These are Federation citizens, not pre-warp civilizations. But the principle remains. Is it right to use power that others don't possess to reshape outcomes? Even when lives hang in the balance? Counselor Troy's voice came through the comm. Thick with emotion. Captain. I'm sensing extraordinary pain from the Justice League. Q has given them an impossible choice. I know, Picard replied quietly. It's the choice I face every day. The choice every Starfleet officer faces when they encounter suffering they could potentially alleviate but shouldn't for the greater good. There is no correct answer. Superman stared at the comatose patients. And everyone on the bridge could see the internal war raging within him. This was a being who had spent his entire life saving people. Who had made it his mission to prevent suffering wherever he could. Being told to walk away from savable lives went against every instinct he possessed. What would you do, Captain? Clark asked. His voice barely above a whisper. Picard was silent for a long moment. I would trust in the Federation's ability to solve its own problems. I would have faith that our research will eventually yield a cure. That our civilization will overcome this challenge as we've overcome countless others. And I would live with the knowledge that my inaction allowed people to die. There are nights I don't sleep, Superman. Nights when I remember faces of people I could have saved but didn't, because saving them would have violated principles I hold sacred. The burden of command. The burden of power. Is learning to live with those choices. Wonder Woman placed a hand on Superman's shoulder. Clark. There's another consideration. If we cure these patients, we're not just saving them. We're introducing Kryptonian medical technology, Amazonian divine healing, speed force manipulation, all things this universe doesn't understand. We'd be contaminating their scientific development, potentially creating dependencies on powers they can't replicate. So we let them die? The Flash asked. His voice cracking. We just walk away? Or we find another path? Batman said quietly, his analytical mind working through the problem. Q, you said the Federation's research is progressing slowly. What if we accelerated it without directly intervening? What if we shared theoretical knowledge, not cures, but directions for research, principles from our universe's medicine that might guide their scientists toward solutions they can discover and replicate themselves? Q raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting information sharing rather than direct intervention? Knowledge transfer, Batman confirmed. The Federation has brilliant scientists. If we provide them with theoretical frameworks from Kryptonian biology, Amazonian healing principles, speed force physics concepts, not solutions, they could adapt them to their own technological base. The cure would still come from Federation research. It might save fewer people in the short term, but in the long term, it builds sustainable medical advancement instead of dependency on us. Diana finished, understanding the strategy. We don't become miracle workers. We become consultants who help the Federation help themselves. John's telepathic voice resonated with approval. The Martian way. Share wisdom, not power. Teach. Don't rescue. Superman looked at the comatose patients again. And the pain in his expression was genuine. Some of them will die before the Federation's research yields results. We could save them today, right now, and we're choosing not to. Yes. Picard said simply. That's the burden of wisdom over power. Of sustainability over immediate gratification. It's the hardest lesson, Superman. And it never gets easier. Clark closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, they held resignation and acceptance, a hero learning that sometimes, the right thing to do is the thing that hurts most. We share knowledge. He said finally. We give the Federation everything we know about neurological healing from our universe. We work with their scientists as colleagues, not as superior beings dispensing miracles. And we accept that this choice will cost lives in the short term to save countless more in the long term. Q studied Superman with an unreadable expression. You're willing to let people die when you could save them? The great Superman, champion of the helpless, choosing inaction? I'm choosing humility, Clark replied. I'm choosing to trust that the Federation can solve its own problems with support rather than intervention. I'm choosing to respect their process even when it's slower than I'd prefer. And yes, Q. I'm accepting that this choice will haunt me. But it's the right choice for this universe, even if it's not the easy one for my conscience. Q was silent for a long moment. Then he snapped his fingers, and they returned to the Enterprise bridge. 3 scenarios, Q said quietly. 3 tests. And you passed all of them by finding answers I didn't anticipate. You didn't impose. You didn't rescue. You didn't play God. You offered choice, you respected autonomy, and you prioritized sustainable solutions over immediate satisfaction. You're learning, dimensional refugees, you're actually learning. The tests are over? Diana asked. The tests are over. Q confirmed. And I must admit, I'm impressed. Disappointed that you weren't more entertaining, but impressed nonetheless. You've proven that power and wisdom can coexist. That strength and humility aren't contradictions. The Continuum will have to revise its assessment. He turned to Picard. As for you, Mon Capitaine, congratulations. Your dimensional refugees have learned more about Federation philosophy in 2 weeks than some Starfleet officers learn in entire careers. They're not perfect, their instinct toward intervention is still strong, but they're adaptable. They question themselves. They consider consequences. They're becoming the kind of powerful allies the Federation needs rather than destabilizing variables it should fear. Does this mean you'll help us return home? Superman asked. Q smiled enigmatically. The dimensional rift's thin in approximately 8 months, according to Mr. Wayne's excellent detective work. When that happens, yes, I'll ensure the pathway remains stable long enough for you to return. Consider it a reward for passing my test, but until then, he gestured broadly at the view screen showing the vast star field of the Alpha Quadrant. Until then, you're citizens of this universe. Act accordingly. Learn continuously. And remember the lessons you've learned here when you return to your own reality. Power without wisdom is tyranny. Strength without compassion is cruelty. And heroism without humility is just self-aggrandizement. With a final flash of light, Q vanished. The bridge crew exhaled collectively. Picard approached Superman, extending his hand. You handled that with remarkable maturity, the captain said. Q's tests are specifically designed to break people. To force them into impossible choices that reveal character flaws. You found creative solutions that honored both your instincts and our principles. I couldn't have done it without learning from you. Clark admitted. From all of you. The Federation has taught me that being a hero isn't just about power, it's about knowing when to use it and when to step back. And we've learned from you. Picard replied. That sometimes, rigid adherence to protocol in the face of suffering is its own form of moral failure. That there are creative solutions between action and inaction. That power, properly tempered, can be a force for genuine good. Riker approached with a slight smile. So, 8 months until you can go home. What do you want to do with that time? The Justice League exchanged glances. Batman's analytical mind. Wonder Woman's warrior wisdom. Superman's moral compass. Flash's innovative thinking. Green Lantern's creative willpower. Aquaman's royal leadership, and John's telepathic insight all aligned on a single conclusion. We want to help, Superman said simply. Not as gods. Not as miracle workers. But as citizens of the Federation who happen to have unusual abilities. We'll follow your protocols when we can. Bend them when we must. And always prioritize the long-term good over short-term satisfaction. In other words, Batman added with the faintest hint of a smile. We want to be heroes the Federation way. Picard's expression carried pride and hope. Then welcome to Starfleet's most unusual auxiliary unit. Computer, log entry. The Enterprise is proud to welcome 7-dimensional consultants who will serve as cultural liaisons, tactical advisors, and emergency responders. May their time with us be productive, their impact be positive, and their journey home be safe when the time comes. Through the view screen, stars beckoned. Not home, not yet, but a universe where the Justice League had learned that true heroism sometimes meant restraint, that real strength included humility, and that the greatest power was knowing when not to use your power at all. Q's test had ended, but the Justice League's real education had just begun. 8 months passed with the kind of velocity that made even the Flash appreciate how quickly time could move when filled with purpose. The Justice League had become an integral, if unconventional, part of the Enterprise's operations, no longer dimensional refugees waiting to go home, but active participants in the Federation's mission of exploration and understanding. The bridge of the USS Enterprise-D had never been more crowded. Alongside Picard's command crew stood all 7 members of the Justice League, plus representatives from Starfleet Command, the Vulcan Science Academy, and even a Klingon observer who had insisted on witnessing what he called the departure of the worthy warriors. On the main view screen, a swirling vortex of colors that had no name in any Federation language pulsed with dimensional energy. Batman's calculations, refined by Data's positronic precision and verified by the Vulcan Science Academy, had predicted this moment exactly. The dimensional barrier between universes thinning to its weakest point in 3.7 years. The rift is stabilizing, Geordi reported from engineering, his visor scanning energy readings that still made Federation sensors struggle. Batman's resonance field is working. We've got a stable pathway for approximately 47 minutes before the dimensional barrier reinforces. Superman stood at the viewport, his enhanced vision perceiving wavelengths and dimensions that even the Enterprise's sensors couldn't detect. Through the rift, he could see at a glimpse of his universe. Not clear, not detailed, but undeniably home. Earth. The Justice League Watchtower. His fortress of solitude, a reality where yellow sun radiation flowed unfiltered through his cells, and the Speed Force connected Barry to cosmic velocity without dimensional interference. Darkseid? Diana asked quietly. Standing beside him, still there. Clark confirmed, his telescopic vision piercing dimensional barriers. The battle's still raging. We've been gone 8 months here, but time dilation between universes means only hours have passed there. We can still make a difference. Then we should go, Hal Jordan said, his Green Lantern ring pulsing with eagerness. The ring had been slowly losing charge over the months without access to a central power battery. Hal had been rationing his willpower carefully. Getting home meant reconnection to the full might of the Green Lantern Corps. But nobody moved toward the transporter pad that would beam them into the rift. Something wrong? Worf asked, noticing the hesitation. Everything's right, Barry said softly, looking around the bridge at faces that had become familiar. Valued. Respected. That's the problem. We're going home. Which is what we wanted. But we're leaving behind this. He gestured broadly at the Enterprise, at the Federation, at the universe they'd spent 8 months learning to understand and appreciate. You've become part of this crew, Counselor Troy said, her empathic senses clearly detecting the complex emotional cocktail filling the bridge. Leaving is difficult, even when you're returning to where you belong. Over the past months, bonds had formed that transcended dimensional barriers. Batman and Data had spent countless hours analyzing multiversal physics, the android's positronic brain and the detective's brilliant mind complementing each other perfectly. Wonder Woman had shared Amazonian philosophy with Worf, the Klingon warrior finding unexpected common ground with the warrior princess. Superman had become Picard's trusted advisor on ethical dilemmas, the two captains, one of a starship, one of a superhero team, recognizing kindred spirits. The Flash had charmed the entire crew with his enthusiasm and humor, making even the stoic Vulcan officers crack smiles. Green Lantern and Geordi had bonded over the technical challenges of maintaining exotic energy systems. Aquaman had found unexpected friendship with the ship's marine biologist, sharing knowledge of oceanic ecosystems across dimensional boundaries. And John had provided Counselor Troy with insights into telepathic ethics that would influence her practice for years to come. They'd also made a genuine difference. The Orion Syndicate's operations in 4 sectors had been dismantled. 17 pre-warp civilizations had been freed from slavery. The Borg had learned that assimilation wasn't inevitable. The 40,000 drones freed from the tactical cube had begun forming independent communities, proving that individuality could triumph over collective consciousness. The Romulan Empire had learned to respect the Justice League's power, leading to unprecedented diplomatic overtures toward the Federation. And on Sigma Draconis, 12 tribes had begun building a unified civilization based on cooperation rather than competition. We're leaving you better than we found you, Superman said to Picard. Or at least, we tried to. You succeeded, Picard replied. The Federation is changed by your presence. Not fundamentally, our principles remain intact, but you've shown us that there are creative solutions between rigid protocol and reckless intervention. You've demonstrated that power, properly tempered by wisdom and humility, can be a force for genuine good. You've taught us that sometimes, the Prime Directive spirit is better served by finding middle paths than by absolute adherence. And you've taught us, Diana responded, that restraint is its own form of strength, that respecting autonomy, even when you could impose better outcomes, is the foundation of genuine morality. That wisdom sometimes means choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Admiral Nechaev's face appeared on a secondary view screen she'd been observing from Starbase 157. The Federation Council has authorized me to make an official statement, she said formally. Should dimensional rifts allow for future contact between our universes, the United Federation of Planets extends a standing invitation to the Justice League. You are recognized as allies, as friends, and as honorary citizens. The doors of the Federation are always open to you. Thank you, Admiral, Superman said. And the emotion in his voice was genuine. That means more than you know. Batman approached Data, extending his hand. The android took it, and for once, his expressionless face seemed to convey something approaching emotion. You helped me understand that consciousness isn't defined by its substrate, Bruce said quietly. That a positronic brain can house a soul as real as any organic mind. That being synthetic doesn't make you less alive. Thank you for that, Data. And you helped me understand that being human isn't about biology, Data replied. It's about choices, convictions, the willingness to question oneself and grow. You are perhaps the most human person I've encountered, Mr. Wayne, despite your insistence otherwise. Wonder Woman embraced Worf, the Klingon warrior, allowing the gesture with uncharacteristic openness. Kopla. Worf. May your honor guide you to glorious victories. And may your wisdom guide you to worthy causes, Princess, Worf replied. You fight with the spirit of a true warrior. The Empire would be honored to call you sister. The Flash hugged Geordi, nearly vibrating with emotion. I'm going to miss our engineering sessions. Man, you taught me that technology isn't just about power output. It's about elegance, efficiency, understanding the systems you work with. And you taught me that sometimes, the best solution is the one nobody thought possible, Geordi grinned. Keep running, Barry, keep being impossible. Green Lantern clasped Picard's shoulder. Captain, I've served in the Green Lantern Corps for years. I've seen dozens of alien civilizations, hundreds of different philosophies about power and responsibility. But the Federation, you guys really got it right. You built something worth protecting. We built something worth emulating. Picard corrected gently. And when you return to your universe, I hope you'll remember that the Federation's strength isn't in its weapons or its technology. It's in its principles: diversity, diplomacy, exploration, and the fundamental belief that different voices working together create something stronger than any single voice alone. Aquaman had been speaking quietly with Lieutenant Commander Nella Darren, the marine biologist. I've uploaded Atlantean oceanographic data to your database, Arthur said. Not technologies you can't replicate, just observations about marine ecosystems that might help your research. Use it well. I will, Nella promised. And Arthur, thank you for reminding me why I fell in love with the ocean in the first place. You carry its majesty with you wherever you go. John and Counselor Troy stood together in telepathic communion, their minds touching in ways that transcended words. When they separated, both had tears in their eyes. The Martian Manhunter because he'd found someone who understood the burden of carrying others' emotions. The Betazoid Counselor because she'd glimpsed the profound loneliness of being the last of your kind. You're not alone, John, Troy whispered. Not anymore. Even across dimensional barriers. You carry our friendship with you, and I will treasure it always. John's telepathic voice resonated with profound gratitude. The dimensional rift pulsed, and Data's console beeped urgently. Captain, the window is narrowing. If they're going to return home, it must be now. The Justice League assembled at the transporter pad, 7 heroes who had arrived as lost refugees and were leaving as valued friends. Superman turned to face the Enterprise crew one final time. When we came here, Clark said, his voice carrying to every corner of the bridge, we thought we knew what it meant to be heroes. We thought power and good intentions were enough. You taught us that true heroism requires wisdom, restraint, respect for others' autonomy, and the courage to choose harder right over easier wrong. We're returning to our universe as better heroes because of what we learned here. And we're better for having known you, Picard replied. Safe journey, my friends. May you find your universe saved and your people grateful. And may you carry the Federation's principles with you as we carry the memory of your courage and conviction. Energize, Superman said to the transporter chief. The transporter beam caught them, and for a moment, 7 figures shimmered between dimensions, simultaneously present and absent, here and somewhere else, existing in the quantum uncertainty between realities. Then they were gone. The Enterprise bridge fell silent. The dimensional rift sealed itself, the fabric of space-time healing like a wound closing. On sensors, the Justice League's energy signatures faded, diminished, disappeared entirely into another universe. They made it, Data confirmed. Life signs detected in their home reality, they have successfully returned. Picard settled into his command chair. And for the first time in months, the bridge felt oddly empty despite being fully staffed. Captain's log, supplemental, he said quietly. The Justice League has returned to their universe. In their 8 months aboard the Enterprise, they have fundamentally challenged many of my assumptions about power, heroism, and the Prime Directive. They reminded me that, while protocols and regulations provide necessary structure, they cannot replace moral courage and genuine compassion. The Federation is better for having known them, I am better for having known them. And I hope that their universe will benefit from the lessons they learned here. To Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Martian Manhunter, live long and prosper. You were, and remain, among the finest individuals I have ever had the privilege to call allies. Riker approached, settling into his chair beside the captain. Think we'll see them again, sir? Picard gazed at the now sealed point in space where the dimensional rift had existed. I don't know, number one. The universe is vast, and the barriers between realities are not easily breached. But I've learned that when beings of such conviction exist, when friendships of such depth are forged, impossible has a way of becoming merely improbable. In the Federation Council chambers on Earth, representatives from dozens of species debated the Justice League's impact. Some argued they'd been dangerous destabilizing variables. Others insisted they'd demonstrated how to integrate extraordinary power with Federation values. The Vulcan representatives noted that the League's presence had accelerated multiple scientific breakthroughs. The Andorians praised their combat effectiveness. The Tellarites argued about everything, as Tellarites do, but there was consensus on one point. The Federation had learned something from the Justice League. That power and principle weren't contradictory. That heroes could exist within a civilization of laws and protocols. That sometimes, the greatest strength was knowing when to bend the rules without breaking them. On Sigma Draconis, the 12 tribes gathered around the reactivated generation ship, accessing centuries of lost knowledge. They would build their civilization slowly, sustainably, making mistakes and learning from them. But they would do so as free beings making their own choices, not as primitives rescued by superior powers. On Ardana, the population of freed individuals had grown to 10,000. Some had returned to emotional suppression, choosing safety over feeling, but most had chosen life in all its messy, painful, joyous complexity. Their society would struggle, would face challenges, would sometimes fail. But it would be theirs, built on their choices, guided by their values. In the Federation medical research facilities, scientists worked with renewed vigor on Irumodic syndrome. The theoretical frameworks provided by the Justice League not cures, but directions for research had opened entirely new avenues of investigation. Within 2 years, they would develop a treatment that extended patients' lives. Within 5, a cure, slower than the League could have achieved directly, but sustainable, replicable, and entirely the Federation's own achievement. And in deep space, a Borg cube drifted through the darkness. But this cube was different. Its drones moved with purpose but also with choice. They had retained their collective efficiency while regaining individual consciousness, a hybrid society that the Borg Queen couldn't understand or assimilate. They called themselves the Liberated, and they would serve as living proof that freedom and unity weren't contradictory concepts. The Justice League's impact rippled through the Alpha Quadrant in ways both visible and subtle. They had changed the Federation not through force or superiority, but through example, through collaboration, through demonstrating that power could serve principle rather than replace it. On the Enterprise, Picard stood at the viewport in his ready room, holding a glass of Earl Grey tea and contemplating the stars. Somewhere out there, in a reality separated by dimensional barriers too vast to properly comprehend, 7 heroes were saving their universe, using the wisdom they'd gained, the restraint they'd learned, the humility they'd cultivated during their time in a universe where power took second place to principle. Computer, Picard said quietly, create a new file in my personal logs. Title: Lessons from Dimensional Refugees. File created, the computer confirmed. Picard set down his tea and began to speak, his words a meditation on what he'd learned from beings who could reshape reality with their bare hands but chose instead to ask permission, to respect autonomy, to prioritize sustainable solutions over immediate satisfaction. The Federation would remember the Justice League, not as gods who descended to save lesser beings, but as friends who learned and taught in equal measure, as allies who demonstrated that the greatest heroes are those who know when not to use their power, as proof that strength and wisdom, when properly balanced, create something greater than either alone. And if the dimensional barriers ever thinned again, if fate or Q or simple cosmic coincidence ever brought their realities into contact, the Federation would be ready to welcome them home, because some friendships transcend dimensions, some lessons echo across realities, and some bonds, once forged, can never truly be broken. The Enterprise set course for the next mission, the next star system, the next opportunity to seek out new life and new civilizations. The journey continued, as it always did, as it always would. But now, the crew carried with them the memory of 7 heroes who had taught them that power without wisdom is just force, that strength without compassion is just violence, and that true heroism sometimes means choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. In another universe, the Justice League returned to find Darkseid's invasion failing, their absence measured in hours rather than months. They rejoined the battle with renewed conviction, enhanced strategy, and a philosophical framework that their universe had never quite articulated. Superman struck with power tempered by restraint. Wonder Woman fought with strength guided by wisdom. Batman planned with precision balanced by compassion. The Flash moved with speed controlled by thoughtfulness. Green Lantern constructed with will informed by humility. Aquaman commanded with authority softened by respect. And Martian Manhunter coordinated with telepathy bounded by consent. They were the same heroes who had left. But they were also fundamentally changed. And when Darkseid finally retreated, when Earth was saved and the Justice League stood victorious, Superman gathered his team and spoke words that would define their philosophy for generations to come. We have power. Incredible power. Power to reshape worlds, to alter outcomes, to impose our will on reality itself. But we also have responsibility not just to act, but to question whether we should act. To respect others' right to choose, even when we could choose for them. To recognize that being strong enough to solve every problem doesn't mean we should. Today, we didn't just defeat an enemy. We demonstrated that heroes can be powerful and humble, strong and restrained, capable and wise. That's what the Federation taught us. That's what we must never forget. The Justice League's legend grew that day not just as Earth's mightiest heroes, but as philosophers of power, as teachers of restraint, as living examples that true strength includes knowing your limits. And sometimes, late at night when the world was quiet and the stars shone bright, Superman would look up at the sky and wonder if Captain Picard was out there somewhere, exploring strange new worlds. Wonder if the Enterprise was still seeking out new life and new civilizations. Wonder if the Federation remembered 7 refugees who had learned that being heroes meant more than just having power. The dimensional barriers stood strong, separating realities that had briefly touched. But the lessons remained. The wisdom endured. And 2 universes were forever changed by the brief, impossible friendship between 7 heroes and a starship crew who taught each other that the greatest power is knowing when not to use your power at all. The Justice League had entered the Star Trek universe as strangers, beings of immense power suddenly stripped of context, dropped into a reality governed by principles they didn't fully understand. They left as something more. Citizens of 2 universes who carried the best of both realities within them. In the Federation, they had learned that strength without wisdom leads to tyranny, that power without restraint breeds resentment, and that the greatest heroes are often those who choose not to act. They discovered that the Prime Directive wasn't cowardice or bureaucratic paralysis, it was profound respect for autonomy, recognition that even well-intentioned interference can cause irreparable harm. The Federation, in turn, learned from them. Learned that protocols, however wise, cannot replace moral courage. That sometimes the spirit of the law requires bending its letter. That creative solutions exist between rigid adherence and reckless abandon. The Enterprise crew discovered that power, properly tempered by humility and guided by genuine compassion, could coexist with principle and regulation. When the Justice League returned to their universe to face Darkseid's invasion, they carried with them something invaluable: perspective. They understood now that being strong enough to solve every problem doesn't obligate them to solve every problem. That respecting others' right to choose their own path even when that path leads to suffering is the foundation of genuine freedom. That sustainable solutions often require patience, collaboration, and the humility to support rather than rescue. The dimensional rift closed, but its impact echoed across both realities. In the Alpha Quadrant, the Federation continued its mission of exploration and understanding, forever changed by 7 refugees who demonstrated that heroes could exist within a civilization of laws. And in the DC universe, the Justice League became something more than Earth's protectors. They became philosophers of power, teaching by example that true heroism includes restraint, wisdom, and respect for autonomy. 2 universes, briefly connected, countless lives, forever changed, and one universal truth proven across dimensional barriers: that power is nothing without wisdom. Strength is meaningless without compassion. And the greatest heroes are those who know that having the ability to reshape the universe doesn't give them the right to do so. The Justice League would remember the Enterprise. The Enterprise would remember the Justice League. And both would carry those memories as reminders that even gods can learn, even protocols can evolve, and even the strongest beings sometimes demonstrate their greatest strength by choosing restraint over action. The stars shine in both universes, eternal and constant. And somewhere between realities, the lessons learned continue to echo.